Hello everyone, I'm International Master Andrew Martin and welcome to this Foxy Openings DVD on the Jobava London system. And on this video I'm going to be presenting an almost entirely new method of play. Now the advantage of the Jobava London system is mainly the lack of theory on it. Opponents can't go to the books and pull out some antidote because they simply don't exist. Players of the calibre of Magnus Carlsen have been using this system to good effect in recent years. And we're going to start with an inspiring Magnus Carlsen game. This game was played in June 2020. Incidentally, all the games on this video are going to be from 2020, so you can guarantee you're going to be presented with the latest information. And this was played in the Clutch Championships held at the Lee Chess website. Carlsen's opponent with black is Jeffrey Jean. Now let's just see the opening moves of the system, where white plays d4, black plays knight f6. Now comes knight c3. Well, when you see that move you automatically think white's leading up to playing e4, so the majority of black players are going to stop white from playing e4. Incidentally, we will take a look at other ways for black a bit later on. And now comes bishop f4. Well, what can we call this? It has no name. It's an original queen pawn system. It's not a very soft because the bishop's not on g5. It is a kind of London system, but you wouldn't expect the knight to be on c3 at this early stage. And it's not a lead up to a black Mardima, because it's going to take white quite some time to prepare the advance e4 in this position. So it's a kind of hybrid of all these different openings, and black has original problems to solve. Now let's just go through this game as an inspiring example. And black decided to play e6. That's one of the mainline moves, very common. And black's thinking about playing c5 and getting a kind of French position, which looks as though it should be quite reasonable for him. Anyway, Carlsen played e3. An audacious alternative here is knight to b5. I mean, that looks ridiculous, doesn't it? It looks like a duffer's move, as Tarrasch would describe it. But there's a sound positional basis behind it, and that is that black has got to protect c7 somehow, and the only reasonable way to do it, without giving up the bishop pair, is to play knight a6. And after that, the knight on a6 is on a very bad circuit. So whilst white loses time here after c6, well, the knight's got to go back to c3. The knight on a6 is very badly placed, and yes, black has gained a move, but is it the type of move he wants to gain? Somehow he's got to get that knight back onto a decent circuit, and practice has shown that white's chances are pretty good here. Anyway, going back to our featured game, Carlsen obviously doesn't like that and prefers to play e3. Jean cuts out any idea of knight b5 straight away by playing his bishop to b4, and white sensibly plays knight e2. So already we're a little bit off the beaten track. It is a queen's pawn game, but it's a very unusual one. And knight e2 just simply says, well, I'm going to play a3, and then you've got to decide what you're going to do with your bishop. Anyway, black castled. White did indeed play a3, and Jean dropped back with the bishop to e7. He's certainly thinking about moves like c5 quite quickly, and then knight c6, queen b6, getting a kind of French defence position. Now Carlsen's next move is extraordinary, and you'd never be able to guess it. He played knight g1, undevelopment. It looks ridiculous, but the knight on e2 was gumming up the works for white, so white simply gets it to a better square. Again, this looks like a loss of time, but I urge you to consider what happens in the game. And certainly here, black is being given original problems to solve. He's on his own. He's got to solve the problems of this very strange position. Jean came up with knight h5. And Carlsen, perhaps slightly surprisingly, decided to surrender the bishop with d takes c5. Black whipped off the bishop. White takes back, and now bishop takes c5. Bishop d3. Seems to me Carlsen aims for an harmonious position in the opening for his pieces. Doesn't worry too much about whether he's better or not. He just tries to get a harmonious position. And one of the ideas of the Jobava+London system is to start a kingside attack. So you begin to wonder whether actually white is threatening the Greek gift sacrifice in this position. For instance, if black plays knight c6, can white get away with bishop takes h7 check? That was certainly in the back of Zhong's mind as he blocked the white attack by playing g6. But that runs straight into Carlsen's attacking move h4. And you're going to see this type of kingside attack is very common in the Jobava+London system. Certainly against unsuspecting black players, there's a very good chance that white could land a big punch using this idea. Well, I mean, it's fairly straightforward. White was going to play h5 and then open the h-file and try and make black's king. Black developed, perhaps not quite believing in what white was doing, and it certainly looks that as though black has got a decent position here. He's defending his king and he's attacking the pawn on f4. Carlsen defended with queen to d2, and now black struck out with e5. Well, perhaps he didn't need to do that, but I guess white was threatening to castle on the queen side and then just to go for broke on the h-file. It's not rocket science. So black decides to break that up by sacrificing a pawn. Does it work? We will see. Carlsen takes the pawn. Black attacks the knight, and white defends his knight. So for the time being, white has been talked out of the immediate opening of the h-file, and now black even gets to regain his pawn by taking on f4. But castle's on the queen side. It seems that white can get a vicious attack here without his dark square bishop, which is quite unusual. Of course, the dark square bishop for black is on c5 rather than g7, and this, as we're going to see in the upcoming play, makes a big difference. Well, Carlsen wastes no time opening up the king, and now the knight comes into g5. He knows he can't hang around because black's counter-attack is also quite strong. Bishop f5 was played, and now in came the knight to h7. Very direct play by Magnus Carlsen. Rook fd8, Zhong saves his rook, but now knight check, king f8, rook h8 check, and the finish is not difficult to work out. Rook h7 check, king f8, and now Carlsen swings his rook across to h1. And black had nothing better than to resign because, well, white's threatening checkmate in two moves, starting with rook h8 check. So that was a quick win for Magnus Carlsen against a very strong opponent, and a good example of the kingside attack, the swift kingside attack that white can bring to bear using this very unusual opening system. Okay, well, after that Carlsen epic to begin with, let me show you a second game where I can truthfully demonstrate the messiness of this system, the kind of chaos that the Jobava+London system could create. This is a game from an online match between Italy and Israel, which was played in May 2020, between Artem Gilevich playing white, whose grade is 2419, and Avital Borychovsky playing with the black pieces, whose grade at the time was 2541. And in this game, black decided to play c6. I guess this will be played by Slav players, by Queen's Gambit players, and the idea is they're trying to make it as solid as possible. Black's position, reinforcing the centre, cutting out knight b5, and following up with bishop f5. I can just see a lot of black players playing this way. Well, they're going to run into the messiness of the Jobava, as white in this game played f3. And the idea of that is to march the kingside pawns forward once again. Borychovsky played h6. Basically, black just let it happen, and white took the opportunity to march up the kingside with g4 and h4. So I would say, watch out for this possibility in your games. You know, it's going to intimidate the opponent, and it gains space. Well, black played knight bd7. Black is just relying on the solidity of his position to see him through. And white played bishop d3. Well, it's a simple enough move. the exchange is more or less forced, and then white's development speeds up. And black played queen b6. White castled on the queen side, black played e6. So we've all seen this type of stuff before. You know, black is trying to keep it as solid as possible, and he even castled on the queen side. So now white's got to find a way through. You know, black's position is very, very solid. How does white break through? Well, he uses his space on the king side to attack. And g5 was played. Black went knight e8. He obviously didn't like the idea of knight h5 in this position. And now white played e4. So there we are. White's finding a way to take his position further, try and open things up as he has better development. Black, we're waiting to see how he's going to play this position. He's still a bit cramped. Well, black took. Again, this was a rapid play event, so some of the decisions are, I would say, a bit dodgy. Opening up the position for the better developed player does not seem like the way forward, but black clearly wanted some sort of relief here by exchanging pieces. Fair enough, bishop e7, and now white just dropped back with bishop e3. Black took on e4. He thinks he sees a tactic, knight e5. But in fact, well, if black doesn't play knight e5, let's just say that white is a bit better here. He's got more space, he's got the open h-file, and the king position is roughly equal, but there are probably more ways for white to improve his position than black's. But knight e5 is just an outright mistake. And white moved in with pawn takes knight. I don't think black saw this move. Rook takes queen, bishop takes queen. And now black finds that actually he can take on g5 check, but after king b1, his rook's attacked. So he can't take the white bishop on b6. So after rook d2, white dropped his bishop back, and black is a piece down. So black resigned. So what actually happened in this game? Well, black thought he was keeping it very, very solid, but he ran into a typical Jobava system attack with g4 and h4, keeping the position messy right out of the opening. I did mention in the opening video that this way of playing with white can often give a quick attack. And so let's see a game from the titled Tuesday series of tournaments, which take place at chess.com. This was played in July 2020. It's between Vladimir Mikhailovsky and Harsha Baratakoti. I hope I've pronounced that name right. Anyway, the black player is graded 2509. That's a bit easier to pronounce. And the opponent is only 2228. So there's a big rating difference. Now black decides to set up a formation with e6 and a6. This says that actually they're going to go c5 quite quickly. And white's got to be on the ball against this approach because, you know, black's plan of setting up a kind of French formation is very logical. Queen coming out to b6 or maybe the pawn to b5 with a nice solid game. Now, we have seen, if we drop back, that Carlsen favours a move like g4 here. But the approach that white adopts in this game is probably, from my perspective, preferable because it's easier to understand. It's a simple case of waiting for c5. We want to take on c5, and when they take back, we want to go bishop d3. And we're angling to play a quick e4 as soon as we can. This, in a way, is similar to the Collie system, but it's a souped-up version of the Collie system because white's got the knight on c3. And white hasn't wasted time playing pawn to c3. You're going to see what I mean in a moment because the game just proceeds along easy lines, both sides castle. But did black think that he was casting into attack here? Probably not. And now white played e4. Now later on we're going to see the consequences of what happens when black takes on e4. But in this game he decides to go d4 and white drops the knight back to e2. Now it's hard to believe that white is going to get a quick kingside attack here, but you will see that actually it comes to happen. Knight h5 was played and white marched forward with e5. Black took the bishop, probably felt that, you know, the knight has no reason to be on the side unless the bishop's going to be taken off, but that encourages the white knight to come to an attacking post. Now black played b5. White played queen e2. We can see what's going to happen here now, I think. Bishop b7 was answered by queen e4. Threatening mate on h7. Black blocked the mate, but now the move that black didn't see, knight to h5. This is a bit of a crusher, as white's threatening knight f6 check. And although black managed to stop that, queen f4 became a very good move. And after knight b4, queen h6, checkmate is inevitable. A 17 move crush. Well, this is the type of thing that black has to face when he's up against the Jobava+London system. And a lot of players are going to castle kingside completely unsuspectingly, little knowing that they're actually maybe even castling straight into a direct attack, as happened in this game. Now, precisely because of the unusual problems that the Jobava+London system presents, and because there's hardly any theory written down on it, a couple of DVDs, including this one, a lot of strong players have become attracted to this way of playing with white. And let's just see how Nigel Short, famous English Grandmaster, former candidate for the World Championship, plays the white pieces. And he's playing International Master Alec Astana Lopez. And this game was played in the Bunratty Masters Tournament in February 2020. The opening moves will be familiar to you. White plays knight c3, d5, bishop f4, and black decides on the common setup with e6. Many players will play this way. And Short now goes straight for it with knight b5. This caveman-like move, which actually has a positional element to it. White is encouraging black to put the knight on a6, where it is very badly placed and takes a long time to get back into the game. We're going to see this directly as white plays e3, black gives the knight a kick, the knight comes back, and now black feels that his position is so compromised, he needs to get that knight back into play. And so he played knight b8. Now let's take a look at this position. We've had 6 moves, but in fact it looks as though we've only had 4 moves each. Both sides seem to have wasted 2 moves. But I would argue that the moves white has wasted he wanted to make anyway, whereas black has not made the moves that he would like to play. I mean, you don't set up this, this triangle with c6, d5 and e6 very commonly, because it's very passive. If black had the bishop out on f5 or g4, it would be a bit different. But in a way, white's tricked black with the move order. He's tricked him into setting up a passive formation. And this gives white the run of the game in the opening phase. I'm not saying black's position's lost or anything like it, but it is a little bit awkward to play. And we're going to see this on the very next move as black plays c5. Well, black's taking 2 moves to play c5 instead of 1. Queen to f3. So white is building up a handy lead in development here. And the move queen f3 you see quite commonly in many queen's pawn systems. You see it in the Torrey attack, you can see it in the London system, you can see it in the Trompovsky, you can see it in the Verisov. The queen is coming out to the king side to intimidate black. Black's usual response is actually to cast on the queen side, but since black has played all these pawn moves over there, c5 and a6, you can't help but feel that casting on the queen side, or even trying to do that, is going to be pretty risky. So Short is very content here. He just castles himself, and well, he feels he's got a better position. And we're going to see how he handles it now as black plays bishop d6. Now white comes up the king side with h4. So this is the default plan. Push the king side pawns, driving black back. Queen c7. Well, I'm totally sure that black did not see white's next move, or he wouldn't have played queen c7. I mean, there's no thunderbolt for white here, but what there is a very unexpected tactical idea. Short play bishop b5. Looks impossible, but I don't think black can take that bishop. If he takes the bishop, we take with the knight, and suddenly black is in a terrible mess. Queen and bishop are forked, And when the queen moves, where's the queen going to go? Probably the only square is d8. White can choose. I mean, he can go knight takes bishop first, but probably knight takes knight is stronger. And then white's going to take that bishop with check, with really what amounts to a one game. So going back to the game itself, black now probably felt, well, you know, I've been done over here, I've been tricked. And he decided to castle, to try and get away from the problems in the centre. Short captured on c6, so as not to waste time. Black recaptured with the pawn, forced, and now white pressed on. So this is not difficult chess, is it? White's pushing up the kingside pawns to try and get an attack going. So perfect for club players. I mean, this type of stuff you can understand quite easily. Knight comes back to d7. Black's still trying to get rid of that knight. White presses on. And now black's position is starting to look very bad indeed. He's got the serious problem of defending his king. And in the actual game, Lopez doesn't manage this task at all. Having said that, this position is very, very difficult for black. You know, if he goes g6, the square g7 is going to be forever weak. And, well, I don't think he can go g6. Let's have a look. g6, we take this knight. What does he even play? The idea is to take on d6 and go queen f6. And if he takes on f4, then knight f6 check wins. If he takes on d7, we just go through that idea I mentioned. We just take stuff off and go queen f6. That is how quick a white attack can come to pass. So in the game, black plays the miserable move bishop e5, but then short flicks in as Zug, and this completely opens up the black king. In actual fact, I think black is probably lost already, because h7 is so weak. Bishop f4 was played, allowing white to take the rook with check. Now came queen takes f4. It's a different type of game here, because Nigel knows now that this upcoming semi-end game is virtually impossible for black. I mean, he's the exchange down, and under normal circumstances, black might have to hold this. Well, he's going to be the exchange down for nothing, and he can't hold it together because h7 needs constant defence. You'll see what I mean in the game. Anyway, black play rook b8. What else could he do? Well, let's just see what happens if he comes in to try and keep his position together. Something like this. The idea is c5 and rook b4. Well, white goes a3. That's a very careful move. And the idea of that is to stop black from playing rook b4 in this position. You know, definitely black doesn't want to do that. So bishop b7 is probably best. And now rook g3 check. It really is very easy. There's nothing black can do. He's going to lose another pawn. If he goes king h8, we just go rook h3. He defends himself. We whip off that pawn. It really is quite easy, not difficult. Going back to the game, black played rook b8. White took the pawn, why not? And now a5. But this is not a difficult technical position for white. As I say, the problem for black is he's got very little counterplay because his king is so weak. So, white played b3. Knight d7, rook d3. I mean, you could say that this position is resignable. And, you know, Nigel shows us how. So rook h4. Bishop came to d7. And now all the white pieces come to extremely good squares. e4, g4. There we are. h7 in the end could not be protected. King moves. Otherwise, mate would occur. Knight d7, rook takes h7, the king does a runner, king to d2, and black resigned. And I think that's justified. I mean, the rook could be in trouble on e4 as well. So an excellent game there by Short. If we go back to the opening, it just goes to show you that, you know, the game of chess has not been played out. We talk about unusual continuations. Well, for me, this is a very unusual move. And it just goes to show, this game showed just how effective this shocking move could be. One of the more effective setups for black against the Jobava+London system involves the immediate c5. In effect, black's playing a queen's gambit in reverse. Nevertheless, white still has a chance to mix it up against this this move, and I'll look at it in a bit more detail later on. But for the time being, let's see a game which was played in the Gibraltar Masters in January 2020 between international master Lawrence Trent playing white and I think Grandmaster Ty Abigail playing with the black pieces, French player. I'm not sure whether he's an IM or GM. I think he's a GM. Anyway, after e3, black took on d4. And the idea of this is to try and drain the life out of the position, to make black's life easier to get his pieces out. We'll have a look at this idea a bit later on, as I say. But for the time being, black played a6. Just to cut out that pesky move, knight b5. I mean, you never know. If black plays knight c6 here, could knight b5 already be a problem? You know, that is how quickly black can get into trouble against this system. I can just see a lot of club players falling for that one. But anyway, let's go back. So a6. Well, white continues developing. So does black. And now white plays knight e5. And the idea of that is to avoid a move like bishop g4. For instance, if white plays a stereotype move like bishop d3, then bishop g4 might be at least okay for black, with the idea of queen b6 coming up, which can put pressure on white's position. So white doesn't want any of that. We just back up. He goes knight to e5. Alright, so black's got to try and find an alternative way. Plays bishop d7 in the game, and white brings his queen up to d3. Again, this is an unusual type of square, but it does give the queen a lot of mobility along the third rank. You know, the queen could swing across to the king side at a moment's notice. This is the main idea of queen d3. Anyway, black plays e6, looks very solid. Bishop to e2, queen to b6, and we were waiting for that move. Black had to play it at some point. And it's a dangerous move. It attacks the pawn on b2 and the pawn on d4. Trent relieves the pressure by taking on c6. And I guess next he's going to castle on the queen side. Well, black took back with the queen. Now, if he takes with the bishop, well, I guess white would just castle. And leave black wondering where he's going to put his king. I guess black could develop the bishop, something like this. We go f3, followed by g4 and h4. I'm guessing it's easy to find good moves for white. And here, let's have a look. What's the endgame like? Looks a tad better for white with the bishop pair. Trent was probably happy that Abigail played queen takes c6, because it gives white the chance to keep more pieces on the board and to spice it up. And this Trent does by putting his queen across on g3. Black played queen b6. I probably think that black thought that he had a pretty good game here. After all, he's attacking two white pawns. If the pawn on b2 goes, then the whole queenside falls apart. And when Trent defends his pawn, then black can step in and take the d pawn. And this is exactly what happens. But this does allow white to work up a head of steam in development by first of all gaining a tempo on the queen, and then secondly bringing the bishop into e5. And the effect of that move is to tie down black's kingside development. Black's a pawn up, yes, but his kingside is quite shaky. Black played bishop c6, and now white moved forward in aggressive fashion with b4, whereupon black tried to get rid of the bishop. Well, again, it's the sort of position where, you know, it looks as though black is doing okay. He's going to take the bishop on e5, and then he's going to have two bishops, and he should be able to get his king out of jail. But let's see what happens. Trent moves forward again. Black whips off the bishop. White takes back. He takes the pawn, but now he runs into a combinational idea. Trent played knight takes d5. Bishop takes d5. Rook takes d5. And now black really is starting to feel his lack of development. He's still a pawn up, but he's coming under really heavy fire. In fact, I'm not too sure whether black can defend this position at all, whatever he plays, because white's attack is just too strong. And it came almost out of nowhere. Black tried f6, bishop to h5 check, g6, and now Trent was able to take on f6 in peace. And this leaves black's position in ruins. He can't take the rook because his queen falls. If he takes the bishop, rook d takes b5. And the black position is falling apart because both his queen and his rook in the corner are attacked. Black played queen c6 in the game, and white didn't even take the rook. He found a stronger move, rook takes b7. And that threatens basically to win the game in many, many different ways. Queen d6 was played to try and cover the king, but no such luck. White can even afford not to take the rook again. And after queen d5, rook takes e6 check. Black resigned. Crushing win for white in 26 moves. So even if black tries to play carefully in the opening, it's not at all clear that white can't get the attack he craves. Okay, well this will be the last video, the introductory section of this DVD. So let's just try and summarise what we've learned. The Jobava+London system, well, this is an opening with hardly any theory written down on it. So it's going to have distinct surprise value to most of your opponents. There's hardly anything in print about it at all. It's an original opening. It can lead to messy positions. It can lead to original positions. It can lead to a quick attack. And this is one of the main advantages of playing this system. You can get a quick attack using it almost effortlessly if you know the main themes and what to look for, which I'm going to concentrate on in the second part of this DVD. So we moved to our last game, which is a very interesting game between two top grandmasters. Playing white is Ruslan Ponomaryov, ex-world champion. Playing black, Vladimir Baklan, and this game was played in the Gladiators tournament at chess.com on May 2020. And again, quite interestingly, white decided to open with knight c3. I've played this move a fair bit online in Blitz, admittedly, but my opponents almost always go d5. They seem to think that knight c3 is a bad move and they want to challenge that move straight away by perhaps threatening d4. But of course if they do that, you can then go d4 and you can get what you want. Having said that, of course after knight c3 they can also go e5, so you're not guaranteed to get what you want. d4 is probably a better start. But this opening obviously suited both players, and the game enters the twilight zone quite quickly with black playing b5. Looks like black was up for a fight as well. And white played bishop e2. Peculiar looking move, but I guess one of the main points of it is to allow white to play g4. This type of bayonet thrust is absolutely typical in this system. And putting the bishop on e2 before developing the knight on g1 allows it. Black played g6. Knight f3, bishop g7. So already we've got quite an original position on the board. In fact, I think this probably transposes to another queen's pawn system called the barrier attack. And no big deal. White played h4. So white is just getting on with it. b4. Knight went to a4. And now we see the role of the bishop on e2. It's supporting this move g4, so that if black goes h5 here, well, white can consider going g4 anyway and trying to blast through. I don't think the move h5 helps black at all in a position like this. So Baklan decided to try and get rid of the knight by playing knight fd7. He couldn't play the other knight to d7 because c6 would hang in that case. White keeps the pieces on. Black played queen a5. And now another quite original move actually. White plays c3. I mean, I think most players would just go b3 without thinking about it, but of course that opens the long diagonal. Instead c3, and when black took, Ponomaryov struck out with b4. Very original stuff. Queen went back. White took on c3. So white seems to have the advantage on both sides of the board. You know, he's got the kingside attack brewing with h5. He's got a grip on the queen side. Where's black's counterplay coming from? Well, Buklan decided to advance in the centre with f6 and e5. So what did Ponomaryov have in mind? I would say he doesn't want to take that pawn, because that lets the rook on f8 into the game, as well as the bishop on g7. So if he doesn't take the pawn, what options does he have? He's got to move the bishop back. Where does he put it? g3 would appear to be the logical square. So that's what white played. And black thought to himself, well, he's got me tied down on both sides of the board. I better open things up in the centre, try and get a bit of play. So that's what black did. Well, okay, black's attacking d4. White ignored that completely in the interest of his attack, and then he put his knight on f4. So whatever black was trying to achieve, I would say, hasn't really worked out. White's prospects of an attack on the king side are very strong indeed, and black's struggling to get his pieces out. Moreover, white's threatening knight takes g6. He's also threatening knight e6, and black's got to deal with all these threats. He tried queen e8 to shore up the shop, and now another original move by white, king to f1. Well, the motivation behind that is clear. You know, white just wants to set in motion a plan involving moving this bishop on e2, or moving the queen up to d2, and the rook comes across to e1. And at that point, when a rook hits e1, black is going to really feel the problems of this position. He can try to bring a knight to e4 as played in the game, but white can stop that straight away with f3. g5. Well, you can't fault Buklan for lack of energy. He is trying to do something. The question is what he's doing any good? Is it weakening his position, or is it strengthening his counterplay? It looks like he was depending on this move, knight e4. And that can be scary if you haven't seen it in advance. But Ponomaryov is not an ex-world champion for nothing, and he saw what black was up to. He took the knight. There was a discovered check. Knight dropped back. e3, lurching forward. But now comes the point of white's play, bishop d3. Why he's allowed all this stuff. Bishop d3 gives black terrible problems. The first issue is he can't take the knight on f2 with the pawn. I mean, clearly that's what he would like to do, but the fact is that after he takes f2 check, he gets wiped out. Bishop h7 check, king comes to f7, queen h5 check, and you can see black is completely defenceless here to white's attack. If the king goes to e7, bishop g6 is strong, and then when the queen moves, we can simply take the pawn on g5 and then move our rook in. Curtains. So going back to the game, black played bishop f5. But after bishop f5, rook f5, and now queen to d3, again black felt the weakness of his king. Still can't take on f2. Well, he can take with the rook. You end up with a lost position anyway, the exchange down. He tried queen f7, but this could only be a confusing attempt, as white then took the pawn, and, well, white should be a piece up here with careful play. King g1. Knight f6. I guess he can play rook e8, but I'm not sure that helps at all. Knight f6. Queen d3, knight e4, knight takes. Yes, white can do that. And white took again. So it's just a question now of how Ponomaryov consolidates this position. We'll go through the rest of the moves fairly quickly as he manages to play the technical phase of the game very well indeed. Black doesn't have a chance. In fact, by the end of the game, you know, it's white who is getting onto the attack again. Just a question of nullifying the enemy counterplay. So here we go. Rook to h3. The black king is terribly weak. Rook f7 was answered by rook f3. Very nice. More pieces are exchanged. There's a check, but it's just not good enough. Black's counter players run out, and after queen h6 check, white resigned. So let's move on now to looking at each of the black responses, the critical black responses to the Jobava+London system in turn, and trying to work out some sort of repertoire against each of them. Well, we come now to the part of the DVD where we're going to take a look at the most popular black responses to the Jobava+London system, and I'm going to make some recommendations for white to you. Once you really get into this opening idea and you start to research it, you may decide to play something else other than my recommendations, because there's quite a lot of variety to hand for white. But at any rate, I hope to give you a solid grounding in the way that white should handle these positions. Now, when I was looking through the various black options, I was quite surprised to see that the most popular line for black over the last few years has actually been g6. But then I thought, well, maybe I shouldn't be too surprised, because there are an awful lot of King's Indian, Benoni and Grunfeld players out there who want to get to their favourite type of fianchetto setup. So what exactly should white do against this setup? Well, there are a number of options. I mean, if you want to walk on the wild side, then you can play a move like f3. I don't recommend it, but you can certainly do it and go e4 as quickly as you can. You might also like to play queen d2 with or without f3 and then go bishop h6. That is another option. You can transpose to the barrier attack with knight f3, which is more or less what I'm going to recommend we do, but not in this move order. But of course knight f3 is a perfectly good move here. Or you can play the move which I recommend, that's just a solid e3. And after bishop g7, I want to play knight b5. Now, Levon Aronian won some nice games with white using this method, and so the pedigree of this system is good. My idea is that club players, I mean, there's only one move for black, he's got to play knight a6. My idea is that club players are not going to feel comfortable in this position with the knight on a6. They won't necessarily know how to handle them, and you should be able to work up some sort of an advantage using this method of play. Let's see how it might work out by looking at a game featuring Aronian with white. In case anybody doesn't know Aronian, he's a very strong world-class grandmaster, one of the best players in the world. And playing black is Salem A.R. Saleh, grandmaster from the UAE. And in this game, white just played solidly with e3. Black castled, and now white played h3. So we can see that this is kind of like a London system in many ways, but it's not quite, because the knight's on b5 at a very early stage and the black knight's on a6. It's not quite a London system, it's not quite anything. It's a very original type of position made possible by that knight on b5. And it really is a question of when black is going to push that knight back with c6. I mean, in many games, he's played c6 already. But then we get that pesky knight on a6 gumming up the works. What are we going to do with it? Meanwhile, white can proceed very easily, bishop e2, castles, and gradually build up. Okay, so the black player put the knight in on e4. And the idea behind that is that he wants to play c6. And then my knight will have to go back to a3, which is not ideal. But Aronian just accepted that in the game. And now it's just a question of whether whose knight is worse. Is the knight on a3 worse than the knight on a6? Well, black tried to get his knight back into the game straight away, and white just played very solid moves now. Bishop e2, black played f6 trying to go active, white dropped away with bishop h2, rook came to e8, and now white castled, and black went e5. So you couldn't fault black for playing energetically, but in a way it's playing into white's hands. Now white doesn't want to take on e5 in this position because that lets the bishop on g7 loose. Instead, Aronian attacked the black centre by playing c4. And I guess he probably intends to build up with moves such as rook c1 and then queen b3. Some sort of sequence like that. Rook fd1 after that. Something along those lines. Black continued to play actively, and white took back with the knight so as not to mess up his pawns. Black played a6, and now here we go, rook to c1. So white hasn't got very much in this position, but he's got a nagging small edge because it's easier for him to get his pieces to good squares than it is black. And we're going to see this as the game progresses. The knight on d4 is a particularly strong piece because it's restricting that bishop on c8. And the move black would like to play, which is bishop f5, is off limits at the moment. So he settles for knight e6. And again, when we think about the last comment, it makes sense. He wants to chop the knight and maybe play bishop e6 or bishop f5. But Aronian is quick. He takes the pawn. Then he plays knight ac2. And suddenly black is now clearly worse because of his feeble pawn structure. So knight g5 was played, maybe some tricks involving a sacrifice on h3. Aronian doesn't believe it, and he goes straight for counterplay, strong counterplay, by moving the bishop into c7. Queen comes up to d7, and now white moves back with a clear intention of rook c7 at some point, I would have thought. So queen to d8. Black's hoping that white will bail out and make a draw here. No such luck, as Aronian plays f3. And suddenly we see that actually black is now in a bit of trouble. Because where's he going to put his knight? If he puts it back on d6, I think there shouldn't be any reason why white can't take a pawn. And that's a really big pawn. Not just any old pawn. Once that pawn goes, the black position really does collapse. So black is down to a5 in the hope that this will bail him out. But now Aronian plays a really good move, bishop to b5. This compromises the whole black position. If black blocks, we can take on d5. When he moves his rook, the other bishop came in, and black is really stuck for move. He's got to go queen e7, and now we could take on d5 in peace. So you could say that Aronian has won the battle of the tactics. Queen f7 was answered by pawn takes knight, and basically if this wasn't a quick play game, I'm sure Saleh would have resigned because it's completely hopeless. Black has been completely done over by white's accurate play, and as advertised, the rook came to c7 as I thought it might. After queen g6 there came knight takes c8, and after g takes f4 there came knight e7. So all the way through, Aronian's using tactics to try and win, and he's not going to be bamboozled by a move like not queen g3. Knight df5 cleans up. Queen g5, pawn takes pawn, and finally black resigned. Bit surprising how quickly it all fell apart, but that's the type of thing that could happen in this system. It was a strange game where black pushed the knight back to a3, but the knight on a3 turned out to be okay. The knight on a6 was a serious thorn in black's side for the whole game. Okay, well the second game I've got for you in the G6 system does come from 2020. In fact, it comes from July 2020. And it's a game between Jeffrey Xiong and Christopher Woojin Yu. And both of these players are very strong. Jeffrey is 2709 and Christopher is 2455. And it comes from a game played at the Gelfand camp. And it features a slightly different move order to the one we're used to, where white started off with knight f3 in place of knight c3. But we quickly reached the typical position that we're looking for after 6 moves. There are various routes to this position. I guess the way we will go in, if we're taking it from the start, is to play knight c3 here, bishop f4, he goes g6, we go e3, he goes bishop g7, and now knight b5, forcing knight a6, knight f3, brings us to our position. So black castled in the game in question, and now white played this move h3, which gives the bishop on f4 square to retreat to if need be, and stops black from using the g4 square for instance, his bishop. So it's a good restrictive move. Now these are two young, highly talented players, so it's no surprise to me to see black striking out with an active move. But is this the type of thing that you want to do against this particular setup? I'm not at all sure it is, because actually the knight on a6 has now got a very uncertain future if white just plays c3. It's very hard now to get it back into the game. What black's going to have to work at it. And meanwhile, while he struggles with this puzzle, you know, white is developing his pieces with no particular problems in development. So here we see black recognising the problem and going into a kind of contortion there to get the knight back into the game. But white builds up with a4. And I would say white's got an improved version of the London system by playing the move order in the way that he has. Got a nice easy plan of playing the rook to e1, maybe the queen to b3. Black is struggling to equalise. He played a6, but Zhong was right on the button. He took the knight and then played queen to b3. And you see it's quite tough for black to equalise here. Both his bishops aren't really doing very much. And white's got ready targets on b7, d5, e7. The pawn structure, the black pawn structure, is a little bit shaky. One of the main advantages of the London system, let's face it, is that white is trying to make it as difficult as possible for black to get active counterplay. And this is the type of position which black players are finding they really don't like, because they can't get active. They're reduced to defence. So I would say white's got an edge because of that factor. He keeps it simple. He moves the knight into e5, and that causes black to take the knight. The knight is too strong there, according to black. It's hard to see where black's going to put his queen that keeps the pawn structure intact. White's going to take one of those pawns if black doesn't surrender the dark square bishop. But of course that is a big concession, because black now has dark square weaknesses around his king. Well, black continued to shuffle the pack, trying to get his pieces into good positions, but for white it's much easier. He just gradually improves his position move by move, and black can't really do that. Knight c6 was answered by bishop f4, and king g7 was played to keep the bishop out of h6, whereupon white strengthened his position by going a5. Black played h6, perhaps not quite knowing what to do, and now white played queen b6. So he's gradually taking control of the position, making black's life worse and worse. Well, you continue to play active moves. He's obviously not used to just sitting there doing nothing. You know, this is something that young players find virtually impossible. But I just wonder whether the next two moves by black make his position worse. g5 and then f6. I mean, they make sense when you think about the black bishop. But on the other hand, they're giving white targets. And Zhong is just effortlessly able to build up by doubling his rooks on the file. Black closes the file, and now white regroups with his bishop. Again, using this strategical idea of improving the position move by move in small increments. This is the way to build pressure in the game when you haven't got any win on the board or winning ideas. Just keep squeezing. Rook fc8. Well, now it's scarcely possible for white to get his pieces into better positions than they actually are. And he's got to demonstrate why he's better here. So the next move is again excellent. White attacks black on the king side. Black's transferred all his pieces to the queen side, so it makes sense to attack on the other flank. Yu rushes the knight over to try to defend. White strips open the position, and of course black takes back with the h-pawn, trying to keep a screen around his king. Bishop g4. Stopping knight f5, attacking e6. Black defends, white retreats. Black defends again. And now white hits at the pawn chain for the second time with h4. Again, when you see these moves, it all starts to make sense. White's gradually making use of the two bishops, in particular the dark square bishop, and he's prizing black open. Black's got a tight defence for the time being, but after takes, it's becoming increasingly difficult to defend because his king is becoming more and more open. Knight g6 hits the bishop retreated. Queen to c7 was played, the bishop advanced to hit the queen, and the queen went back. Now it's time for white to bring the queen over. Black's position, it looks very dodgy to me because he doesn't have any defence around the king. Again, he lashed out. Well, I suppose if he sits there, it's really going to be unpleasant. You know, white's just going to manoeuvre his pieces in easy fashion towards the king, towards the g-file perhaps, and yeah, black won't be able to do very much at all. So I suppose he felt he had to lash out. He went f4, but he'd overlooked something here. White went bishop takes g6. He's able to sacrifice the exchange in this position because of the excellent move bishop e5 check. And because this was a quick play game, I dare say black probably either overlooked or underestimated this move. At any rate, it's a bone crusher because it's going to force mate if black takes the bishop on g6 with the king. But when he retreats, we have rook f1. Again, a crushing move. Black defended, in comes the queen, and now defence is non-existent. Therefore, black resigned. So by positional means, in the end, white got his kingside attack after all. And I think that was actually a very good game by Jeffrey Chong. So far we've seen that white should adopt a kind of positional approach against 3g6. But there are opportunities definitely to turn this positional way of playing into a direct attack. And we're going to see those in the last game. This is a game from the Pro League played at chess.com in February 2020. Between Martiro Zion, 2613, and Abhijit Gupta, Grandmaster from India, 2603. Again, the move order is slightly different in the actual game itself. I'm going to take the traditional Jobava+London system move order. It all transposes into the same thing. White goes knight f3, and Gupta decided to give the knight a prod as quickly as he could. Maybe to head off the idea of white playing c4. I mean, if black hangs back with c6, like let's say castles first, you know, it's not out of the question that that white can play c4 here if he wants to, and try to get a good version of the Grunfeld after something like that. You might like that. But at any rate, going back to the game, Gupta prodded the knight went back, and now black got on the case straight away, just getting that knight on a6 back into the game. White played bishop e2, and now black played bishop g4. So the way he's playing it, well, I could just see a lot of players doing the same sort of thing. Take a kind of simplistic approach, get the pieces out, bishop's coming to g4, I exchange off bishop for knight, then maybe I could put my knight on e6 or angle for e5, or some such thing. Well, white asked black to show it, and he played h3. Black took, castled, and now white thought, okay, I've got my positional edge of the two bishops, but the conditions might be right for a sudden strike on the king. And this is the type of advance which has been making the London system incredibly popular with club players. It's been transformed from some sort of positional method into a direct attacking method, with white pushing his kingside pawns forward as far as he can push them, and as quickly as he can push them, to put black under pressure. And this is one of those games. Well, black brought the knight back into play, and now white wedged the bishop in on e5. And I think that's a good move. Take close note of that move, because it could win you a lot of games on its own. Black doesn't really want to move the knight on f6, but at the same time that bishop is really fixing his whole position. Black tried to stop the advance, stem the flow. White moved in with g4. Okay, again, this doesn't take too much heavy thinking to see what's going on here. And that forces black's hand. Black's got to do something here. He can't just sit and let his king be dismembered. So he took. White took back. I guess black thought if he exchanged a lot of pieces, he would be safe. He's not safe, because of course white's threatening h5 and just bulldoze his king. So d4 was played, but it wasn't good enough, because white castled on the queen side. Now, of course, a top grandmaster like Gupta is not going to go for this unless he feels it's absolutely necessary. And in fact, he sacrificed his queen here with d takes c3. We can see this as a way of trying to stir things up in a position which he thinks is very bad. I mean, that's the only way we can see this. He didn't blunder his queen. He's giving it up deliberately to mess the position up. But I think White's just got so much pressure on the king side that however Black plays now, he won't be able to defend this. He tried knight f8, and now White played another crusher, e6. Problem for Black is he hasn't got any immediate play against the White position. He's just got to sit and watch White crush his king. And there are so many recent games like this in this line that, you know, the whole business of playing this system has become very attractive to White players. Well, to cut a long story short, Black took rook d6. He doesn't have enough for the queen here, and White continued to strip open lines before that rook on a8 came into the game. There was a diagonal check. Black moved out of the way. There was another diagonal check. Black blocked this time. He really would like to have avoided blocking, but I think actually if he goes king f7, White can play queen b3 and then pick off that pawn at b7. I don't see any reason why he shouldn't take the pawn at b7. In fact, well, it's getting hard to see a move for Black. If he goes king g7, we go queen takes b7, and then Black's got to play rook e8 to survive, which is obviously disastrous. If he goes king e8, we can just take this pawn again, and that's absolutely horrible. Once the pawn on b7 drops, that's it. So back at the game, rook f6 was played. There was another check. There was another check. And now b7 is hanging again. So Gupta just had to recognise this was lost. He tried knight e6. In came the queen. Rook d8. Black's trying the best he can. But now another wave of attack, if it were possible to throw more pieces at the king, then White's just done it. Rook f5. Maybe threatening a cheapo. White takes everything. He's not afraid. Check. King's perfectly safe in the corner. Black brought his rook across. Queen e4. You can see the Black king is terribly exposed. Knight f8. And now a very cute move to finish the game. Rook g7 check. Black resigned. Actually, I like this game. Let's just see why he resigns if he takes it. Queen e7, and then White picks off the rook on c5. So there you are. My recommendation against g6 is e3, bishop g7, and then knight b5, forcing Black to put his knight on a6, and then just we go into a position which is easier to play for White. I don't say it's winning. I don't say it gives a definite advantage, but it makes life awkward for the opponent, and that is how you win games of chess. Okay, well now we move to a game between Dominic Horvath, whose grade is 2446, and Philip Enoki, whose grade is 2276. And this game was played in the Austrian Internet Championship in May 2020. And it more or less follows the same lines as the first one, where Black tries to play solidly, challenges the bishop on f4, and now we move in with our knight to e5, getting ready for g4 and then maybe h4. Well, Enoki, who, despite having a 2276 grade, doesn't necessarily sense the danger in this position and castles. But of course that is casting straight into a big attack, and White wastes no time whatsoever in pushing the kingside pawns forward. Already Black's got some issues with his bishop. h5 is coming, f3, the bishop drops off the board. So Black felt compelled to play a terrible looking move, h5, which again gives White the chance to lethally damage the kingside pawns. White took on d6, just satisfied that he was messing up the pawns, and after c takes d6, White went g5. A lot of pieces came off the board, but I think we can say that White has emerged from this opening with at least a slight edge, and the possibility of a later kingside attack. You'll see eventually White presses home against the Black king. Well, Black defended the pawn on e6, and White played d5. establishing a nice light square control all over the board. Black push forward. Well, we can see this pawn on e4 is actually quite weak. White attacked it. Black has to let it go. White takes the pawn. Queen f7 attacking f2, and white defends himself. Obviously black's got a little bit of compensation here because the black knight is quite well placed, and white has yet to find a safe haven for the king. In the game, Horvath decides to cast on the queen side, but there will be some element of risk attached to that. Well, white played f3, just restricting the black pawns, and black pushed forward with a4. White showed no fear. Black pushed forward again, b3, and now black put the queen on c7. So this would be a normal game of chess, apart from the fact that black is a pawn down, and that makes all the difference, because I don't think he's got enough compensation to help him here. Admittedly, as the game goes on, white makes a mistake, but black doesn't punish that mistake. For the time being, black is looking to land some cheapos, hence the move knight a4. Well, white's only got one move against that, c4, but it's good enough, because now I think we're threatening to take the knight. Knight must go back. And now a safe move, rook to c1, just defending against all the threats, and black played queen to b6. So when we see this move, we know that black is thinking about sacrificing a piece on b3, but how sound is it? Well, it clearly frightened white, because actually white made a mistake now. What he should do is play for slow consolidation. Just recognise that there's no threat on b3 and play some sort of move like rook f1. The point of this is to be able to play bishop h3 at the right moment. So for instance, if black, let's verify that this doesn't work first. Takes, check, into the corner. Black's already out of steam. White's going to play a move like queen c3, and then black has no moves. So with that move not on the table, black's got to find another plan. So maybe something like rook e8 would make sense. Well, then we go queen c2. Black's got to recognise that the g6 pawn is very tender, and if he tries to cover it with rook f5, then we go bishop h3. And now we see the point of rook f1 earlier. White is defending that pawn on f3. Well, with limited time at your disposal, it's hard to find these ideas. In the game, white played what he thought was a safety first move, and black quickly played rook a e8. But in fact, black missed something here. He missed the stunning move, queen takes b3. And again, I reckon that was as a result of quick play. And that, I think, gets black right back into the game. I don't say black's winning, because white's got some moves to defend himself, but he mustn't take the queen, of course. Having missed that, white comes to his senses. Queen went back to a7. Pawn came on to b4. Knight went to a4. Bishop to h3. We've come back to a position where black is just a pawn down with nothing to show for it. And now white presses forward to get the final attack going, f4. Black took, trying to bring his pieces into the game, but no such luck. White was able to press on unobstructed with the attack. Black took, white recaptured, check, king went into the corner, and white wrapped up nicely here by simply attacking the h5 pawn. Well, via f4, threatening the knight and checkmate. That's what occurred. So going back, I think we can safely say that castles is probably an inaccuracy against this particular move order. It walks straight into a white attack. Well, we start to move now through the black alternatives, playing against the Jobava, and we come to bishop f5. This is a solid looking attempt, which I think many Queen's Gambit players will try against you. It seems reliable, but we're going to adopt an approach which uses the bishop on f5 as a target. We start off modestly, but in fact our intentions are anything but modest. White can get a ferocious attack with the way we're going to play this system. Now let me show you a game between Natalia Buksa I'm not sure. She might be a women's grandmaster. At any rate, her rating is 2410, so a very strong player. And Anastasia Rakhmangulova. And this game was played in a quick play event on the internet, chess.com, in July 2020. I'm always slightly reluctant to use quick play games, but in the current environment, I'm recording this in July 2020, that's all we have to go on. A lot of online chess, a lot of rapid play games, very few classical chess tournaments. But nevertheless, this is an excellent game, and it's worth quoting in full. So black proceeds as though nothing is going on, just rock solid moves. And now comes the first part of our plan. We're going to plant a knight on e5 as quickly as we can. We're going to use this knight to set up an attack. And the way we're going to attack is to play g4 as quickly as possible. This is the sudden surprise way that the Jobava+London system can get black. And certainly in this game it had a devastating effect, as after bishop g6, white pushed forward again with h4. So I mean, the plan is quite easy to remember. You put your knight on e5 as quickly as you can, then you stick the kingside pawns forward. And suddenly, you know, black is thinking to herself, well, actually, what am I going to do? There are traps all over. White's threatening h5, clearly, and black has got to respond to that. Well, in the game, Rakhmangulova came up with bishop b4, but white just played a3, keeping all threats open. Bishop takes knight, pawn takes bishop, and now a very reluctant move, h5. But if we examine the alternatives, they're few and far between. If you play h6, white's going to take that bishop anyway. If you take on e5, she's going to take back with her pawn, and then what does black play? I think you'll find that that bishop is dropping clean off the board. So going back, black is already in trouble, and from quite surprising ideas and moves. So h5, of course, white takes the bishop, just completely laming black's pawn formation on the king side, and now the easy move, bishop d3. So we've got two bishops and a massive attack out of the opening. I'm not too sure what more you could want. So black's got to defend herself. She played knight f8. I mean, I guess you could play king f7, but it's looking very, very shaky, the whole position. I would imagine g5 is just a good move after that, followed by queen f3. But obviously black found that so unattractive, it wasn't even worth considering. White pushed forward. Black came in. And we reach a position where actually white has got a number of good moves. In the game, Buxa played bishop takes e4. That was a simple approach to the position. She could have played clearly c4, just relying on the two bishops and gradually opening up the game. That looks good for white. And also queen b1 is good. Pressing the black queen side. I think that's the best way to put it. Black has just got a horrible position here because she can't do anything. But in the game, as I say, going back, white adopted a simple approach, just hoovering off the knight. Black took back, and now queen e2 was played, with the idea of queen b5 check, picking up a pawn which black blocked. In came the bishop, attacking the g7 pawn. Black is completely tied down, and now white continued this idea of improving the position move by move. Rook b1, attacking b7. Well, black's nerves obviously were starting to get a bit frayed here, because she played a move which I don't think is any good. But it is hard to see an adequate solution to the problems of this position. You know, white's just better all over the board. And black's got various weak pawns to defend. Queen a5, as played, allows rook takes b7, and that can't be wise. Despite the fact black gets a check-in, doesn't really do anything. And after knight d7, white just preserved her bishop and left black in a mess. Rook d8 was played, bishop b4, queen a1 check, black's lurching around trying to do something, but never really achieves anything at all. And basically white's just winning this position, and that's the only way to describe it. There was some toing and throwing, but now comes the winning move, queen to a6. Having vacated the back rank, black finds that her king is chronically weak. Black try king e7, queen d6 check. The finish is easy to understand, and then checkmate. So, just to go back, let's have a look at this one more time from the opening. We're going to see this again as we go through this variation. Knight e5 is the first part of the plan, and then stick the kingside pawns forward to cause some problems. Okay, well now we move on to, in some ways, a similar variation to the last one, where black defends by playing the immediate c6. Now this move, again, could transpose to a kind of Queen's Gambit or Slav position, where black sets up a light squared triangle in the centre, and black can play bishop f5 if he wants to as well. Of course, the main benefit of this idea from black's point of view is that he's cut out our knight b5 plan. So we've got to come up with something different if we want to combat this variation. Anyway, the recommendation is to start slowly with e3, and let's say he plays bishop f5. This is what a lot of grandmasters do when they come to this position, and now we're going to play f3. So very similar to the plan we set out in the last variation, but it's a bit different. Now, I'm going to show you a game from the Title Tuesday tournament. It's a very strong Masters event at chess.com, which was played in June 2020 between Ivan Ivanisevic and Eric Hansen, two very strong grandmasters. And in this game, Hansen played the combative queen b6, which I think actually is probably the best move for black in this position. It's certainly the move which puts the onus on white to find a plan. If black plays e6, I mean a lot of players will do that, or knight bd7, again, very common looking, white's going to go straight through with the plan of g4 and h4, which has an intimidating impact and gains space. So we can be happy if black allows that. But queen b6 is a bit of a different kettle of fish. Now in the game in question, Ivanisevic played very sharp move g4. If you don't like that, I mean the game entered the twilight zone quite quickly, as you're going to see. If you don't like that, I can offer you a completely new move here, knight ge2. According to my database, this move has never been played before, and it's quite interesting. And the idea is that if black takes on b2, we're going to go rook b1 and sacrifice the pawn on c2. Black can certainly gobble this pawn, but then our rook hits the 7th rank, and it's not so easy for black to unravel. Black may play his knight out, then we can get our pawn back straight away. If he plays other moves, we've got a positional edge based on the fact that we can get our pieces into the game very quickly. We can play king to d2, we can play g4, we can play knight to g3, the bishop comes out, rook comes across. It's not so easy for black to unravel in the same way. But if we go back to the game itself, as I say, Ivanisevic played g4, allowing black to take on b2. Well, of course, this is very interesting stuff. If you're a strong grandmaster, I dare say you can get away with this stuff. At club level, it's necessary to know exactly what white is up to. Now, white played knight a4. Well, it's certainly a very sharp position. Clearly, if black takes on c2 here with the queen, we just take his bishop. And if he takes on c2 with the bishop, we just take his queen. Either way, white wins material. So already black's down to queen a3, and now Ivanisevic goes c3. And in a way, this is quite a deep concept. We can see it as a deep pawn sacrifice. Again, it's really a question of taste, whether you like playing a pawn down or not. But if black plays bishop g6, that's exactly what you have to do, because the best move here is queen to b3. Slightly surprising that white offers the exchange of queens, but the point is that after the exchange of queens, in this position white's threatening knight b6, which would win the game. So black has to defend against that. Now we come forward with h4. Let's say he blocks, we move forward. Then we stop him from playing c5, And we can see Ivanisovic's idea as a positional pawn sacrifice, where black is cramped. He's pawn up, but he's cramped. It's not that easy for black, because actually white's got an interesting development plan here. Rook h2, and then if black plays e6, we bring the knight in, and then he's got to defend the pawn. We swing the rook over with definite positional compensation. Well, of course, all this is very difficult to handle in a blitz game, so we have to go back to the game itself. And black struck out with b5, which actually is probably not very good, but he had to make an on-the-spot decision. And, you know, this is what you come up with. So, white took the bishop, black took the knight. And now another striking move, rook to b1. Of course, in quick play, it's possible to play such moves over the board with plenty of time. You might think that black could refute this move by, for instance, taking the pawn. But even there, you know, white has a really strong initiative here. He's on the knight at b8. He can get all his pieces out very quickly. The black queen's going to be pushed around. Queen takes on a4 is a possibility as well. Actually, I don't like this position for black at all. In the game, Hansen played knight bd7. And now white went bishop a6. So again, offering the pawn. However you look at this position, white is always going to get compensation, because the black queen has spent a lot of time roving around in the depths of white's camp, taking pawns, whereas white's getting his pieces out. And the position got even more murky after knight h5, bishop c7, and then e5. Well, black is refraining from taking either the pawn on c3 or the pawn on a2, but he's got to do something quickly, because Hansen now moved in with bishop b7, and that is a move which is going to win the exchange, whether black takes on c3 or not. In the game, black played rook d8, white whipped off the rook, of course, and finally got to defend his pawn. Now if we just drop back, well, let's say he takes the rook. Now we take on c3 check. I mean, it is probable here that white can simply go queen d2 and swap the queens off, because, well, black must oblige. Then he takes the bishop, we take the c6 pawn. This is terrible for black as well. So I don't know what to make of this very obscure position. It's seemingly turning out very well for white. Anyway, white played knight e2, and this is certainly a good position for white now, as he emerges from the smoke, the exchange up. But black is still in the game, clearly. So white defends his pawns and keeps the black queen kind of incarcerated on a3. Black plays g6. And now another interesting move, c4. Opening up the game, trying to get at the black king. Black took on d4, white recaptured with the knight. And now rook e8 created a threat. Black's threatening the pawn on e3. So white's got to defend it. He does so simply by playing rook he1. Black took on c4. Can't have liked that move, because the black king is looking very shaky here, but the idea was to play queen to c5. However, against that, white gobbled another pawn, and that certainly forces the exchange of queens, because black's rook is attacked as well. So the queens must come off. Rook f8. White gobbles the pawn on g6, and we can definitely say that white's winning now. He's the exchange and a pawn up, and black can only fish around for some sort of cheapo attack. It's not going to happen. White's position is too good, and the Grandmaster consolidated fairly comfortably just by making natural moves. There was a check, king f2, some pieces came off. That kind of suits white. Okay, black can win the exchange, but then white's passed pawn is going to walk down the board. Black's pawn structure is very ragged, so black tried to conjure up some complications. Rook came to f4, very good move. Takes, and of course black can't take the rook now, because after h6 the pawn is just queening. Knight comes to h4, let's say, bishop e4, knight comes there, and I think we just preserve the knight here. Another way that black commonly uses the variation with c6 is to transpose back into a kind of fianchetto position by playing g6. This is also very common. We should know how to deal with it. Well, I'm going to recommend that we strike out in the true Jobava fashion here with h4. No mucking around, just go straight for the jugular on the king side. Our plan could be to sacrifice the pawn. We might also just play our bishop to e2 and play h5 and get on with the attack. Let me show you a game from the World Blitz Championship played in December 2019 between Grandmasters Vladimir Fedoseev and Alexander Ingic, just to show how devastating this idea can be. Well, black decided to block. I mean, I think that's a very plausible reply, isn't it? I think most of your opponents will be running scared once you play h4, and they could block. But that gives white some squares on the king side to play with, the e5 and the g5 squares. But for the time being, Milosevic just develops his pieces. Black tries to do likewise. White plays knight f3, and then black moves in to pin the knight, whereupon white plays queen d2. Now black's got a decision to make. I personally think he should take the knight, but I can see why he didn't in the game, because that just gives white the run of the position. There's the open g file for black to worry about, some sort of sacrifice on g6. There's castles on the queen side for black to worry about, and there's a plan with e4 for black to worry about. For white, I don't see anything that white has to worry about at all in this particular position. Nevertheless, when you see what happened, going back to the game, you might believe that black should have done that, because he just played knight bd7. Okay, that's about as normal as it gets. But now white started to use the squares that black weakened when he played h5 by playing knight to g5, and this is a strong move. Note the rest of this game, because it's an object lesson really in how to attack the black position. So of course the knight drops back to f8 to try and defend. Now comes f3. That's another benefit of moving the knight from f3. The bishop drops back, and now white starts to reroute all his pieces towards the king side to start a devastating attack. Black tries to exchange pieces, and now another very good move by white, bishop e5, just jamming up the black position. If you can play that move, then it's certainly worth consideration. It really messes black up. But now I think black just loses it. I actually don't think he can see what to do. He castled. If there was ever a case of castling into it, this is the game, because white just got an automatic attack here. He took the knight, black recaptured, knight came to f4. You can see already that there are sacrifices looming on g6. Black played queen d7 thinking he could defend himself, but now came the blitzkrieg attack with g4. Well, I mean, maybe black has to sacrifice a piece here, go bishop takes g4, but you know, I'd be very happy with that if I was white. Just take the piece. Instead, he takes with the pawn and subjects himself to what can only be described as a crushing attack. Black took, white captured, black took on e5, white captured, black took on h5, and now the not so surprising move, queen h2. Well, what do you suggest for black? I mean, there just really aren't any moves. And this is a strong grandmaster, 2600 plus, going down. f5 was played, queen takes h5, black resigned. A simple and effective wipeout. Moving on, let's now come to a game between two grandmasters, which was played in the US Masters Open in Greensboro in 2019. Again, I failed in my quest to use only games from 2020 on this DVD, but then again, most of the games from 2020 are blitz games or rapid games, and this is a classical game. So the opening move should now be familiar to us. White is shaping up to get the attack going. He puts the knight in on e5, and then he's going to push the kingside pawns forward. And perhaps now, working on his own, Masiecha comes up with an interesting move, knight fd7, a kind of scorched earth policy. Black sees that the kingside pawns are coming forward, so he moves the knight out of the way. Never mind, white starts the charge. This type of thing can be very intimidating to club players, to see this type of play. You know, it's unsettling to be attacked right out of the openings by this type of pawn charge. Well, it's unsettling even for grandmasters, as we're going to see. So f6 was played, forcing some exchanges, and now g4. and white pushes the pawns for all they're worth. The h pawn comes down to h6, and only now, after g6, does white take on d6. So here we have a very unconventional position on our hands. I mean, isn't that one of the main aims of this entire opening? To get to an obscure position. Having said that, white's got the better pawn structure, although the black pawns in the middle, they're not weak at the moment. They might become weaker as the game progresses, and black certainly has some chances on the queen side, which white must not underestimate. But in view of white's better pawn structure, better bishop, more cohesive position, I think we can say that white's got the advantage. Now, white in the game played e4. Now, it may have been better here to actually play f4. This cramps back a little and gives white some more options. For instance, let's just see a few of these options. Queen d2, getting ready to cast on the queen side. Black prepares a reception committee. Well, I'm going to argue that after f5, white's got the better game. He's left black with his double pawns, and he's forcing weaknesses on the king side. Going back to the game, white decided on e4. And we can see the temptations of this move. You know, black's probably got to take it, and the white knight comes to a very good square in the centre. But at the same time, you have allowed black to get rid of his double pawns. And I guess white didn't want to do that. Well, black castled, and that's an interesting sacrifice. The point of it is, if white takes this pawn, then black goes check. A very trappy move, and then queen d5. So that was a trap which white did well to avoid. Of course, the grandmaster sees that sort of stuff, you know, in an instant. So he preferred to play queen d2. But that allows black to play d5 and then e5. And my impression is that black is getting right back into the game at this moment. Of course, white can argue that he's using the black central pawns as a target to attack. And that is a very valid point. But at the same time, black is getting his act together. And bishop e6 uncovers the rook at f8 and attacks the pawn at g4, which white pushed forward. Well, all these advances look logical, and they do work together with the bishop and, you know, emphasise the general coordination of the white pieces. But at the same time, white has rook f4 to contend with. And this is an awkward move to meet, because black's threatening queen takes g5. As it happened, Naroditsky met it very cleverly. He played rook a e1, which hits the pawn at e5, more or less forces black to take. And now knight e2 was the clever point. And this prompted Masieja to sacrifice the exchange with rook a f8, which of course he doesn't need to do. Now the first question is, of course, why doesn't black defend the queen with the rook? I mean, he can defend it from g4, or he may defend it from f5. Either way, the queens are coming off. And now clearly white's point was to play f4. Black's a pawn up, but he's got awkwardly placed pieces. I think that's the best way to put it. And well, if he takes, knight takes. Again, this is not totally easy, because if he goes bishop f7, white goes rook e7, and I believe this is the type of position that Naroditsky was trying to achieve, where really only white can be better, I think, because, you know, white's very, very active, and he's threatening some interesting tactical ideas, such as knight h3 or things like that with a double attack. So perhaps this is why Masieja played rook a f8, with the idea that if white takes the exchange, which he does, the rook and queen are going to prove awkward for white to shift. But white continues to play very well, and after rook e3, he's starting the process of consolidating. Well, black played rook g4, and now another move perhaps which black didn't expect, the cunning f4. This is a really tactical idea, because of course black could take that, but now came rook e f3. And yeah, white's played this really well, because black can't take that rook. The queen drops, and there are problems with the back rank. So if the rook moves to g4, rook f8 is mate straight away. So black took another pawn. Now comes another clever move, queen to e3. Black is a little bit stuck for moves here. He tried bishop f5. White took. Of course, the main point of queen e3 is that the queen is now in the game, and black's queen is out of the game. Queen g5 was answered by king f2, and h5 by bishop h3. Then came d4. Queen to f3, putting the pressure on. Again, there are checks on the back rank, followed by mate if black takes the bishop. Let's just see that. Black takes, go check, another check, and that's mate. Hence king g7, but now white liquidates, and black resigned this position. Well, his king is getting dismembered, and the knight is way offside. Don't think the check does any good at all. Well, white would just come up the board, and eventually the checks will run out. So black resigned. What can we say about the opening? Going back, knight e5 put the question to black, and now black played improvisationally. Knight fd7. There may be better moves, but there's no doubt about it, this plan of g4 h4 is hard to play against. Before we leave this section, I'd like to mention another line which is actually quite interesting here, and that is where after bishop f5 e3 black lashes out with the move c5, and if white doesn't play accurately against this move, this can work very well for black. I've got a game for you from the Gibraltar Masters tournament, again a classical chess tournament which was played in January in 2020 between FIDE master Tim Wall from England playing with white and a Spanish player called Jesus Arroyo Rodriguez. Now here, where black is challenging in the centre straight away, I think it's inappropriate to go f3 or g4. Instead, let's revert to an old plan where knight b5 is the move. And this is what Wall played. You've always got to watch out for this move at every stage in the Jobava+London system. And again, it has the merit here, forcing knight a6. Well, Wall decided to play a different type of game here, a more positional struggle. And instead of any adventures on the king side, he decided to play c3. Black played queen b6, and white played a4. And this game is interesting because it will show how difficult the black position is to play after the insertion of the moves knight b5 and knight a6. After all, what is this apart from a normal London system position with the pawn triangle in the centre on c3, d4 and e3? But it's easier for white to get the pieces out than black. As we'll see in the game goes on, this makes a big difference. So the game trundles on for the time being, with both sides playing just what I would classify as normal moves. I mean, you couldn't get a more normal sequence than that. It looks like a standard London system. But black is about to now receive a shock, because I suppose he thought he was being clever when he played knight b8. You know, just getting the knight back into play, there's nothing going on. Well, there is actually something going on, and he missed a tactical idea. Actually, it might be worth just stopping the video for a second and seeing if you can see what white did here, because it obviously came as a massive shock to black. Well, white played bishop c7. A very clever move. Typical of Tim Wall's inventive style. Of course, you can argue if we just drop back one move that black need not allow that. But I have to say I prefer white's position here, because he's got sort of a nice London system position. He can gradually build up, whereas for black that knight on a6 is so lousy he can't get it back into the game. You can understand how mistakes of this nature occur. Black is getting frustrated, and the point of this move is that if black takes it, then white goes a5, and that is very difficult to meet. The black queen is protecting the rook. The only square she's got to keep on the rook is c6, and then white moves in with the second knight, and extraordinarily, the rook is gone. So black in the game had to grovel on with queen e6, but now Wall shows the second point of his clever idea. He took on b8. Another unstereotyped move. Well, if black takes back with the c rook, then I think there's nothing wrong with knight c7. Well, and when he took back with the a rook, knight takes a7, winning a clear pawn. I find that a really unusual and original combination. So black now played rook d8 and Wall took a second pawn. And I think we can say that after knight d4, white is winning. White is 2 pawns up. He's got to rescue the knight from a7, but for the time being he's got black in a fork. Black played queen e5, and now Wall marched on with c6. And that really should consolidate the position. Well, black now, quite correctly in my view, made the opinion that his position was completely lost, and he went for it. Bishop takes h3. I mean, that's the type of thing you should do when you're losing. Try and confuse the issue. Wall was not to be confused. He played f4, keeping the black queen out of play. And after queen f6, he showed no fear and just went for c7. In a way, this whole black attack is bluff. White should be able to defend. He's got the rook, he's got the bishop, he's got the queen backing up the bishop. There should be enough defensive resources to protect his king. At any rate, what happened in the game was not convincing. Black played e5 and white just took the rook. Black has to take back. And now just knight f3. So calm play by white, taking off all the pieces, and this should win. Well, the game went on for a few moves with black kind of scratching around for chances. It's very unlikely that he'll be able ever to get any chances here, because the white king is quite well defended, and white's got so many extra pieces which he now starts bringing back into the game that in the end black can't defend, and that's exactly what happens. White even has time to whip the pawn off on e3. h6, bishop d3, g5, knight fd4, and black resigned. His whole position is falling apart. So the last game in this section provided us with a good lesson. Always watch out for the opportunity to play knight b5. This can be a game winner because it forces black to play knight a6, and that's not a good square for the knight at all. What I'd like to do now is to show you a game between two strong players, but not necessarily of master strength. In other words, a game which we can probably all identify with. It's a game from a women's masters tournament which took place in Hillerod in February 2020 between Petra Kaiser, whose grade is 2072, and Margarita Zarytovskaya, graded 2022. So not fantastic players, but the mistakes that are made are very relevant to us and will be instructive. And again, we're featuring our favourite system where we play h4. Now in this game, black decided to allow white to play h5 if she wanted to. She was probably going to take the pawn and try and defend the position out. White didn't play h5 straight away. She gave her opponent the chance to play h5 herself again, but black didn't. She castled, and to me that shows over-optimism. If you castle straight into white's attack here, you are really asking for it. So Kaiser needed no further hesitation, and when black took that pawn, well, you have to sacrifice the exchange. Once you've said A, you have to say B. Clearly white now has a fantastically strong attack for the exchange, but you've still got to win the game because black blocks. Right, now it may be, if you're using a supercomputer, that you can defend this type of position with black, but for practical reasons I would never recommend that anybody even go near a position like this with black, because it's just too difficult. For white, it's so easy to shove the pieces into good positions, and for black, what is black's plan? Okay, she played queen e8, but there's no way on the planet that white is ever going to allow the exchange of queens. The queen comes back. What is black's plan here? The only plan I can see for black is to manoeuvre this knight, which is attacked at the moment, over to the king side somehow, either to g4 or maybe into e4. But white should be able to deal with that by simply moving this knight to specified location, g5 or e5 let's say, and then playing f3. White can strengthen his position by castling on the queen side and rook h1. So black has serious practical problems to solve. And that's exactly what happened in the game, because black played knight d7, no surprises there. She did bring her knight over, and now rook h1. And that stops the knight on f6 from moving. Well, already this is very unpleasant for black, although she's the exchange up. She's down to h5, which does not look very pretty. White brought the queen to g3, and black placed the knight on g4. But immediately the knight goes there, her own knight out of the way, and now f3 becomes a threat. You can see the practical problems that black's facing. She lashed out with e5. White took it. Black recaptured with the bishop. So she's doing the best that she can. And now knight e2. Again, funneling pieces over to the king side to start an attack. Bishop takes e5. Queen takes e5. Hoping for the exchange of queens. No such luck as white plays knight f4. I've got nothing to add. The same considerations apply to this position. It's just rather difficult to defend. After rook g7, there came queen f3, attacking the pawn, and now Zaritovskaya dropped her knight back. This defends d5, but it does not defend h5, and knight takes h5 was the consequent move thereafter. Black played knight e4. So black at least has managed to conjure up some threats. She's threatening knight d2 check, but it's all too easy for white to deal with the threat. And after takes queen d1, white retains the attack, and you can see that black has some problems. So bishop e6. Did she need to do that? Well, I suppose rook d7 is a possibility. I guess after that white will play queen e2, and I'm not too sure that putting the rook on d7 has helped black, because it simply blocked in the bishop on c8 and made black's development even more difficult than it was before. Bishop e6, however, runs into knight takes rook. I would imagine black's unhappy about giving up the exchange here, but, well, she might feel she could hold it. No such luck, as the queen comes to h5, and that is the winner, really, because it sets up devastating threats. Rook h8 was played, but that is completely hopeless, of course. White took it, and then the fork wins. Can black do better? Well, scarcely. It's hard to see a move. It really is hard to see how black is going to defend this position. And I'm not even going to try. I would just offer the simple advice to avoid such positions like the plague. So that was another good example of h4 working out. Before we leave the topic of c6 in conjunction with g6, I must show you one more game from the Novi Sad Open played in 2018 between Valery Mikhaev and Angun Batu. The white player is of master standard. The opening moves were not perhaps what we would expect, a slight change in the move order, but it comes to the same in the long run, because black soon plays the move c6, and now we get our favoured position. The way we would do this using our preferred move order, if I just drop back to the start, would be, let's say, knight c3 here, d5, bishop f4, c6, e3, g6, and now h4. They block, they don't have to, and now bishop d3, deferring the development of the knight on g1 for the time being. Bishop g7, and only now knight f3. And this brings us back to our game, with black playing the best move here, bishop g4, and we playing queen to d2 to get out of the pin. Now, it seemed unwise in our opening game for black to allow knight g5 or knight e5, so to me it's very sensible what black does in this game. They take the knight. So how exactly does white play this position? Well, white's got two bishops, an advantage in the centre, which I think it's important to try to expand with e4. That's what happened in the game. And white's going to castle on the queen side and just play on claiming some sort of edge. Well, I mean, it could be more than an edge, especially if black allows e5 followed by e6. You know, black's got to be very careful. He just doesn't get blown off the board. But as is common among players who can't quite grasp the thread of the game, black goes wrong quite quickly and goes into a kind of defensive huddle here by taking on e4 and playing knight f8. The problem with that is it just gives white the free run of the game, and d5 emphasises that. White's prizing open the light squares, and after which he's going to use his bishop pair. Black played e6. White weakened the pawns on the queen side and castled long. He feels he can do that because black can't really play rook b8 because bishop takes b8. And without use of the b file, how is black going to get counterplay? Well, black brought the knight back into play. White played a good move here, keeping the king in the middle. And not only that, making room for f4 and then f5. You see, it's so easy to find ideas for white in a position like this. For black, it's really tough. Knight b6 was answered by bishop a6. f4 would certainly come into my consideration in a moment, but bishop a6 first because the bishop's attacked on d6. Black defended, and only now f4. Rook b8. Black tries to buy white off. Naturally, white could take the exchange if he wanted to, but he prefers to play more carefully, allowing black some tricks, just confident that he can beat back the tricks. Now, knight c5 is interesting. Black has started to play with imagination. The point of it is that if white takes the knight, black's going to exchange the queens and then take on c3. And suddenly there are some issues along the b file for white to solve. Well, as you can see, b2 is creaking if white takes the bishop. Then knight a4 check is the most accurate move, followed by removing the bishop, and white's certainly not better here. So going back to the game, well, I think Mikhaev could have taken, and maybe should have taken, the rook, just call black's bluff and move away. What actually has black got in this position? He can't play knight a4. I mean, that's the move he wants to make. We just take it and then plunge the queen in, and that's bound to win quite quickly because we're exchanging all the pieces. Well, black can fish around by castling instead, but then I think e5 is just a good move, blanking black out. So I think white could have taken on b8. He makes the practical decision not to, and to move his bishop back to e2, just allowing black a few tactics, but they don't work. Bishop takes c4. Black plunges in. Rook takes b2 check, hoping for king takes b2, knight a4 check, that sort of thing. But white plays a very good move now, king to c1. And that, I think, calls a halt to black's attack. Black's got too much stuff attacked. The knight's attacked now. e5 is going to blank out the bishop. Very difficult to find moves. Black tried queen b6. White played e5. Of course, hampering black all along is the fact that he can't castle. You know, if he could castle, it might be different. But without the castling move, he's down to more tricks. Knight e4. But if white keeps calm, this is not going to work. And white did keep calm. He played queen to d4. Well, again, this looks very scary because can't black take on c3 here? Well, he can, but white can recapture. White is a piece up here, so he can allow a few checks. That's exactly what happened. More checks. White blocked. And now suddenly black is out of useful checks. He's down to rook takes rook. White recaptured, and then queen takes pawn. But this can't be satisfactory. Although black's got, what, 3 pawns for the piece, the problem is it's king stuck in the middle, and white even has queen takes a7 in this position. Turns out the black king is more vulnerable than white's king. Bishop h6 check was played, and white just coolly strolled across the board. King to c3. And without any more tactics at his disposal, black resigned. Well, I don't know what to make of this line with h4. For the time being, it seems promising for white and puts black on his mettle. You know, what is black going to do? Most players will play h5, but if they don't, well, you maybe can ram your way through on the h file and get a strong attack. Well, is there anything else black can try in the position after c6 and then e3? We've seen bishop f5, we've seen g6, but a lot of players may go passive in this position and play a move like e6. There's nothing greatly wrong about that move. It's just that I prefer to see a black pawn on c5 in a position like this rather than c6. The black setup gives the impression of being rather passive, and it is. But as white, you nevertheless have to know the right way to play against a position like this. So let me show you a game between Grandmaster Mark Hebden, who's a real aficionado of all these queen's pawn systems, playing white, and he's playing the I think Women's International Master Ingrid Lauterbach, and this game was played in the Four Nations Chess League, that's the professional league in England, in January 2020. And Hebden played bishop d3. Well, there's no way that white can be interrupted from building up. That's the nice thing about this position. You know, black's got nothing to worry white in the opening phase of the game. But Hebden now plays a careful move, h3. That's characteristic of the London system, just giving the bishop a retreat square should it be necessary. Lauterbach continues solidly, but somewhat passively. Both sides castle. And now black plays knight h5. I'm not totally sure about that move, but on the other hand, white's probably going to play e4 in a moment. That will be his plan. Maybe put the queen on e2 first. Should black play b6? I mean, that looks like a way to get the pieces out. Knight h5 doesn't convince me at all. Just drives the bishop back. And I was sure that the idea was to go f5 in this position. But maybe she just didn't like that in the end. Instead, g6 was played, very cautious, and now white played e4. So what, of course, we've got now is some sort of very passive version of the Caro-Kann. It's transposed back into a kind of e4 position, where black has got problems to solve. The problems stem from the fact that the queenside pieces is difficult to develop, and a freeing pawn break doesn't automatically come to hand. That's what black needs, c5 or e5. She tries c5. Hebden goes for the quick kill. He needn't have done that, but he goes for it. In comes the queen to h6. Lauterbach plays a rather, again, very defensive looking move, and Hebden brings his rook to the centre. So what is white doing apart from developing all the pieces? Black has serious problems to solve here. Knight came to c5. Okay, that's sensible because it forces an exchange of pieces. Hebden takes, black recaptures, and now c3. Well, black can't take that pawn. Bishop takes g6 will just finish her off. So rook e8, knight takes d4, and hey presto, white has regained his pawn with more or less the freedom of the board. Black is still struggling to develop. Doesn't matter that the bishop comes back to f8. The queen drops back to a nice central position. Bishop c5, she can't think what to do. Well, Hebden goes on, improving his position. Bishop c4. And the impression that you get all the way through this game is that black is just playing far too passively. But from a certain point in the opening onwards, it wasn't possible to do anything else. It's very noticeable that black's queenside pieces, the bishop and rook, are still on their original squares. She's toiling to get them out. Well, g4 was played. Not sure what to say apart from the fact that is extremely embarrassing for black. Knight goes back to g7. Well, then you've got all sorts of problems with your kingside. Louterback tried e4. Queen went back to e2. Perhaps now she feels she can go there, but then knight takes bishop, queen takes, bishop f7. It's no surprise that white is able to find a combinational solution to this position because his pieces are just so much better placed. And the point of that, of course, is to decoy the black rook. Black rook is overloaded. It's needed to defend the e4 pawn. It's also needed to guard the back rank. You can't do both. So she tried bishop e6. Hebden took the rook, and now bishop c4. So ingenious play. But nevertheless, there was a price to pay. Queen takes pawn. Rook takes bishop, and now queen to d4. Hebden is very happy to enter an endgame, where of course he's a clear pawn up, and he dominates the 7th rank. So I think we can say this is an easy win for white. Having said that, how do you do it? Well, the usual way is to create a passed pawn, but in this position, black's piece activity is so poor that white could do it without that. And the way he does it is to infiltrate with his bishop. Now there are threats to the knight, and bishop f6 check is coming. She tries to defend her king position, but loses another pawn. There was a capture, a rather unfortunate move backwards, and now bishop f6. Concluded a well-played game by Mark Hebden. So what I think I'm saying is that passive ways for black against the Jobava+London system don't hold out any hope of success. White can just build up a good position by easy development, as we saw in this encounter. Okay, now we move to a surprisingly common variation where after bishop f4 black plays a6. Now this has a similar motivation to the line we examined where black played c6, but the main idea is actually twofold. Firstly, black prevents the white knight from going to b5, so that plan is cut right out immediately. And secondly, black wants to play c5 in one go. So for instance, if we just take play on a few moves, natural moves, I think you'll agree, black can play c5 in this position, and that's one of the main ideas behind the a6 variation. Now I'm going to offer you two replies to this variation so that you can mix it up. The first of these will be pretty straightforward, where white just develops the pieces. Knight f3, takes on c5, perhaps a slightly surprising move, and then plays the bishop to d3. It's a very straightforward way to meet the variation and should give white the chance of an advantage through simple means. Just dropping back a few moves, there is a complicated variation here, g4, and I'm sure that will appeal to a lot of attacking players. Magnus Carlsen's used this in recent times. Quite dangerous. Black plays c5 in this position, then white just moves straight forward like a bulldozer. Well, this is risky. It's not, completely watertight, as it were, but you might like to try this as well. Let's go back to the first variation now, where white settles for straightforward development. And I'm going to show you a game from the English Online Blitz Championship, played in May 2020, between Grandmaster Mark Hebden, playing white, and a very promising young player called Henrik Stepanyan, playing with the black pieces. And black does in fact play c5. So we get this sequence where white takes on c5, black recaptures. And now white does nothing more really than to get the pieces out. He plays bishop d3 and then castles. Black castles at the same time. Now clearly, to take this position forward, white's got to play e4. And there are very similar lines in the Collie system where white does exactly the same thing. But there, of course, white's got a pawn on c3 and his queen's knight will be on d2. Here, it's slightly different, because white's dispensed with the move c3 altogether. And Hebden plays an interesting move now. He plays a3. He clearly wants to play e4, but he doesn't want to be hassled with a knight coming to b4. So that is quite an interesting way to play the position. Black waited, in a way. I guess he's thinking about playing e5. And now Hebden strikes with e4. So this is the main idea behind the whole variation. And as in the Collie, black, if he wants to, can exchange queens. But this doesn't ease his position, because it's difficult for him to develop his queenside here, whereas for white all the pieces are developed and on very nice squares. So we enter a queenless middle game here, which is very, very comfortable for white because of his superior development. What black will have to do over the next few moves is to somehow push those impressively placed white pieces in the middle away from the centre. But Stepanian tries to do this but never quite manages it. So h6 was played, rook fe1, f6, and now seeing e5 coming up, Hebden moved in with bishop d6, and that's another good move. I mean, if black leaves it there, let's say plays bishop a7, the bishop's really jamming black up, and if he takes it, the white rook takes up an impressive position in the middle of the board and really putting on the pressure. This is exactly what happened in the game. Well, this is a very difficult position for black because white can improve his position almost effortlessly, whereas black can't do very much at all. In fact, black's completely tied down. If he's down to moves like knight a5 here to try and defend his queenside, then it's really horrible. The knight could get trapped on the edge of the board. In the games, Stepanian decided to play rook b8 and try and mix things up. Hebden wasted no time in damaging black's pawn structure and then just playing the careful move b3. So white can add to his list of advantages here. He's not only got more active pieces, he's got a queenside pawn majority and a better pawn structure. So all these things combined means that black's game is very uncomfortable, if not lost. And against a seasoned grandmaster like Mark Hebden, then you know, it's very difficult from here on in. So black played bishop b7. I think that's maybe the best try to try and damage the white pawn formation, but even so, you would expect Hebden to win this position. Just a clear pawn up, and now a passed pawn on c2, ready to push. Well, black played e5, and white just improved the position of his rook. Black played rook ed8, and now an interesting move by Hebden, f4. Very typical of his sharp style. You know, I'm sure there was a technical way to win this position, but this is a tactical way, and when the other guy is very short of time, as I'm sure he was, it's a good solution. White occupies the 7th rank. Black challenged the rook, as he must. White comes over to a7, and now black threatens the king with f3. This threat is quite easy to parry. White just plays h3, makes room for his king to come to h2, and now black's in trouble. Pushing the pawn to f3 has exposed that pawn, and so even if one pair of rooks is exchanged, black's still going to be completely lost. He tried king h7, white doubled on the 7th rank, and black went passive, after which white took a pawn and threatens rook takes f6. Hence the move king g2, but now king g6, but now comes king h2, and up comes the king to take a second pawn. h4 keeps the black rook out. Stepanian brought his king in. Hebden hit the rook. Really, we're reading the last rites for black here, because there's absolutely nothing he can do. g5, Hebden took it. Black took back and resigned. Either that, or he didn't want to see rook f7 checkmate on the board. Okay, well, this is a fairly straightforward answer to the a6 variation. What is white doing apart from developing his pieces and then going for e4? I think that's accessible to everyone. And I don't think black can deviate from this opening sequence. Well, he can, but it will be inferior for him. Just take on c5, bishop d3, and then preparation for e4 may commence. Well, if you found the last game straightforward, then the coming game will be equally easy to understand for you. It's a game from the Lyon Blitz Open, which was played in July, and playing white is Simon Williams, dashing, attacking English Grandmaster, who has put quite a lot into analysis of the London system and the Jobava+London system in recent years. He's very keen on the idea. So it'll be interesting to see a game by him. and he's playing a Norwegian player called Philip Bøe Olsen. This game was played in the Leon Blitz Open on chess.com, July 2020. Luckily for us, it's the line with a6. Just to repeat the two ideas behind a6. Number one, black cuts out knight b5 plans. Number two, black wants to play c5 in one go. And that's exactly what happens in this game, as after due preparation, black plays c5. Now the next move for me is the surprising one in this line, but it underpins white's idea. White gives up the centre in order to avoid being hassled by the black pawns, and then develops his pieces with the idea of getting in the move e4 as quickly as possible. And Williams being Williams, he plays e4 straight away. Now, just dropping back, you'll recall in the previous game Hebden played a3, and I think I prefer that move, and go e4 next. And the reason I prefer it is that after e4, black can play knight b4 here, and I'm not sure what white does against that. I would much prefer to avoid that move if I am white, because the light square bishop is an important attacking piece. But blitz tournaments being blitz tournaments, you know, some of the games are instructive, parts of the game are instructive, parts are not very accurate. e4 was played and black played the passive knight e7. I don't particularly like that move. I think he should have gone knight b4. But having done that, Williams moves in with e5. And now we're already getting into the territory of Greek gift sacrifices on h7. It's amazing how quickly a white attack appears, can appear, in this variation. Now Olsen already must have felt he was in trouble. He tried knight h5, which is in its own way a tricky move. If he goes knight d7, then I think we go in with the Greek gift, and I just don't think that black can survive this position. It's a horrible situation. I mean, maybe queen d3 check is the best move, but he didn't. He went knight h5, and that's tempting Williams to play bishop takes h7 at the same time, which is not a good move here, and I'll just show you why, because it is quite instructive. Now the usual ideas for white here are queen to d3 or queen to g4. Let's have a look at either. Queen to d3, knight f5. The problem for white is that his bishop is attacked on f4, so he's got to lose some time defending that bishop or retreating it, and then black can recuperate. The same happens after queen g4. It looks very dangerous. Obviously black can't take the bishop now because of knight takes e6, but what he does do is to play f5, and I think that refutes the white attack, as white cannot play queen g3 here, and if he takes, we take with a knight. I think actually black is winning this position. So we can see knight h5 as a cunning trap, but at the same time it does strand the knight on the edge of the board and more or less force black to play the ugly move g6 next. So if white avoids the trap, I really don't like that knight on h5. And in fact Williams now moves forward with typical energy, putting black under the cosh on the king side. He plays g4, driving the knight back to g7, and then he pins the knight on e7, black unpins, and now the queen comes up, getting ready to join the attack. So in just a few swift moves, black is on the verge of defeat, because white's just threatening bishop f6, queen h6, knight g5. It's not difficult chess to understand. Well, black played knight c6. White moved in, black went back, white moved in again. I mean, again, this is not difficult to understand, is it? Well, black's only got one move here, I think. He's got to take this bishop, but it is a miserable move, and then grovel with knight e8. But g5 was played. We're reaching a position where, you know, it's hard to suggest moves for black. He's running out of ideas. White is gradually going to manoeuvre a rook to the h file, and that will be that. So black tries something with queen f4. Knight comes back to e1. Another excellent move, making room for the knight to come to g2. Pawn up to f4, rook f3, rook h3. The game plays itself. So black elects to sacrifice a piece here, but there's no way that this is going to be good enough. He attacked the queen, knight came in, an in-between move, and Williams just took the piece on offer. And so after 22 moves, we can definitely say that white is winning this position. Black's only got a pawn for the piece, and he's only playing on because it's blitz. So we quickly go through the next phase of this game, where white is consolidating his material advantage, and it's very difficult for black to suggest anything. Williams opens the game up at his leisure, and because black tried to do something, black allows white to penetrate with his knights. Back goes the knight, another pawn goes off the board. As I say, I think black is only playing this game on because it's blitz. It's completely hopeless. There's absolutely nothing that black can do. As you can see, white's anchoring these pieces, and then he comes to 7th rank. There's really nothing to be done here, and once again it's very difficult to see why black is not resigning this position, but on the game goes. Not going to dwell too much about on this. This just goes on far too long. A few moves. Black's just taking his time to resign. Still not resigning. Extraordinary stuff. That's it. 36 moves after white won the piece, black finally manages to resign. Okay, what are we interested in? We're interested in the opening and the way it went. Yes, this is the critical position. Should white play a3 or should white play e4? Well, if you play e4, you've got to reckon with knight b4. That's my main point. So a3 followed by e4 would be my preferred sequence. The Jobava+London system can branch out into some very obscure and dangerous variations, one of which I'm going to show you now, and it occurs in the line where black plays a6. We proceed one more move up the highway, and now comes g4. This is the alternative to the straightforward approach I recommended on the last couple of games, where white just plays knight f3 and bishop d3 and aims for e4. This is a far more belligerent approach, and curiously it's one that Magnus Carlsen prefers. He tends to stick to rapid and blitz when he plays this. Of course, it is a lot more risky than the simple method mentioned earlier, but it is very interesting, and it is a super aggressive way to play the white position. If that's your style, if that's what you like to do, then this could be the approach for you. And it's not difficult chess. White just comes forward with the g-pawn, a kind of bayonet attack against the black position, and then develops his pieces behind the bayonet pawn. One more move, knight c6. Now, one of the most famous games that was played in this line was a game between Magnus Carlsen playing white and Fabio Caruana playing black. You can't have two better players at the chessboard in 2020. And the game I'll show you was played in Stavanger, Norway in 2017. And in this particular game, Carlsen played a3. So he obviously feels that there are some ideas of black getting a piece to b4 here, and maybe black going on a raid with his queen, queen b6, and then queen takes b2. Well, in that case, if you think that the queen might be there, white could play knight a4, winning the queen. So there are some ideas behind a3. Of course, it does encourage black to advance on the queen side, and now white gets on with the job, h4. So you can see the attractiveness of this plan for white. It's direct, it's going for gold on the king side, no holding back, but of course it is rather risky. And Caruana played bishop b7. There was a 2020 game where black played c4, and that also worked out quite well for him. I wonder what Carlsen would have done against that. Sometimes in these positions it's not out of the question for black to actually transfer his king via d7 to the queen side. But I mean, clearly in this particular position black is getting ready for a queen side push, something like queen b6, a5, b4, something like that at some point. And then where's white going to put his king? So if white plays this variation, he's got to contend with that move. Bishop b7 was played in Carlsen Caruana, still good, and white marched on. Okay, knight b6, knight e5. mainly to make room for the queen to come into the game. Now Caruana took, white took back, and now black played knight c4. I should stress this was a quick play game, so once again, if I say that Caruana has a better move here, that's not criticism of any kind, it's just a remark. Knight d7 was certainly a better move here. Let's just pause for a second and note that this pawn on g5 is on pre. And the idea behind that is that if white protects the pawn, we can go e5. And this, I think, turns out quite nicely for black. This is maybe what Caruana should have done. Of course, white can't take that pawn, because then his rook is attacked as well as the knight. So I think we can see from that brief variation that this is actually a slightly looser way to play this with white. Anyway, knight c4. Carlsen, as usual, doesn't waste any time, gets his rook off the long diagonal, and now black played f6. So black's position looks great. The only thing is, where's he going to put his king? Well, Caruana answers that question by casting on the queen side, and white played queen e2. For me, this just goes to show a refreshing approach by Magnus Carlsen. He's willing to take risks in rapid play. You wouldn't see him playing like this in a normal game, I should think. It's just simply too risky. The risk pays off. Queen takes d4. And now Carlsen comes up with a bamboozling piece sacrifice here. Rook to d1. Can't think that Caruana expected that. He takes the piece, in comes the queen, king c7, there's a check. And now I think black misses a winning continuation, which is king b6. An extraordinary idea. And of course you'd have to have nerves of steel to play this. Probably black couldn't work out in the allotted time the consequences of rook takes d8, bishop c5, check, king a5. You know, this is such an irrational position. And after rook d2, because black's threatening the f2 pawn, we've even got rook d8. Black chucks another rook on the bonfire in the interest of checkmating the white king. But hey, we can't blame even the second greatest player in the world for missing that, because he's got no time. Instead he played bishop e7 with the same idea, jettisoning a piece to get his rooks playing, but this lets Magnus in, and once he's in, he stays in. Queen f8, king c7, queen takes rook. In a flash, black's chances have evaporated. A lucky win for Magnus. So just to review one last time, if you feel aggressive, you feel like you want to take some risks, then g4 is the move. If you want to play just safe and solid, then the variation involving simple development, a capture on c5 and then a quick e4 might be the way to go. Well, moving through the variations, we now come to one of the most important lines for black, where he plays e6. This is an economical way to play, and if black can get away with it, well, he should certainly do it. Black's saying that knight b5 is not a threat in this position. He's ignoring that idea, and he sees no reason to prevent it with moves like c6 or a6. He's going to play c5 in one go, if he can. Since he's allowed us to play knight b5, I'm going to recommend we do. And this has been Jobava's choice in recent years. It's also the move that scores best for white, because black has got to play this uncomfortable looking move, knight a6. I mean, clearly black can play bishop d6 here. That just gives up the bishop here without a fight, and white has already got a slight edge in this position straight away. But knight a6. Now we come to a game from the Baku Olympiad, played in 2016. I've tried valiantly to choose games from very recent play, but they're all blitz and rapid games, and I want to show you that this variation can succeed in classical chess. This is a great game. It's between Jobava and Veselin Topalov, playing with the black pieces, so it's hardly possible to have a stronger opponent in this particular match between Georgia and Bulgaria. a3. Well, remember this move. It's a Jobava speciality, and the idea is simply to cut out bishop b4 by black, which can be a bit annoying. in the sense that, let's say white continue with a developing move, c6, knight comes back, bishop b4. We probably don't want this to happen, because this is a little bit awkward for white. Therefore, we cut that idea out straight away, and Jobava feels it's not that important. White's not really losing time by a3, it's a kind of useful move, and so the game proceeds with black having this silly knight out on a6, as usual. So bishop d6, Topalof's keen to get those bishops off the board, and white doesn't give any ground. He plays e3. To take the bishop just develops black's queen for him. To retreat the bishop is a concession. So by playing e3, white's saying he's not afraid of this exchange at all. This wasn't what happened, by the way, because, well, white's cementing a grip on e5, and black is struggling to equalise here. That bishop on c8 is hard to get into the game. So Topalov moved his knight back. White developed steadily. Black took the bishop now. Queen d6, and then the knight came into e5. b6. So here is the way that Topalov is going to get that bishop into the game. Queen to f3. Another typical move in this system. The queen moves towards the king side to put some pressure on. And black plays c5. Knight to b5. Well, of course, Topalov must have known by playing c5 he had allowed this move. He probably felt, well, I'm getting rid of my bad knight on c7, hooray. But white still got slightly the better of things here after taking on d7 and then castling. Only a very small advantage, but at the highest level, that's all you can probably hope for out of the opening. These guys are so good, they know how to play chess so well, that a slight edge is probably something you should be grateful for. Anyway, black castled. And now Jobava took on d7. And what that essentially does is produce a game where only two results are possible. A white win and a draw. It's hardly likely that black is going to win this position. And especially after white's next very clever move, f5. White's got slightly more activity and slightly more space going into this major piece endgame. Perhaps you might not find this interesting, but the way Jobava wins this game is very interesting, as he continues to work with this slight edge. Topalov is wriggling, you know, trying to get some tactics in, but white stops him. And after rook takes d5, as you can see, white's maintaining this edge, and he's now got a queenside pawn majority to work with too. So black swaps. Probably doesn't feel as though he should lose this position. That may be right, but, well, it's just not that easy for him. The queenside pawn majority, white's king is over there supporting the majority. Black's got a double pawn on the king side. It's not so easy to draw these positions against a really strong player, as you're going to see. So black prepares the minority attack, and white safeguards his king as best he can. Black pushes forward, white blocks, and now black moves into the hole that white created, whereupon white plays rook e3. He's planning to eject the queen with rook c3. Queen comes in. Rook e2. So, yes, I think Jobava, over the last few moves, has now changed his way of thinking. Beforehand, he was just playing for two results. Now, he knows he's got to take a bit of risk to win this game, and so it's all about calculation. Is rook d1 good for black or not? Well, we shall see as white bravely takes on b5. As I say, it's all about calculation now. White's king is about to be driven out into the open board, but can black take advantage of it? And if he can't, well, white's now a pawn up and possibly more to come. Well, I don't see any tactics. Do you? White's threatening rook e8 check, followed by liquidation. I don't see any black tactics to stop that. Moreover, rook e8 and then queen e5. This could spell significant trouble for the black king. So king g7 was played. There was a check. The king came out to h6. Another check. King g7, and now queen f2. Trying to consolidate. After queen h1, there came a check. king went back, and now rook e7. Another very well calculated move, allowing black to play queen takes g2, in the full knowledge that queen d2 gets the queens off, and now produces a position where, although white's not material ahead, he's got two passed pawns on the queen side. Rook a1 was answered by rook e1, a very strong move, and rook takes a3 by b5. I was thinking about rook b1, but clearly that's going to come next. And black resigned this position, either resigned or lost on time. As you can see, the passed pawns on the queen side are coming down, and there's very little black can do to stop it. He takes the pawn. Well, here we go. So, an interesting game, a game where white played solidly for a long time without risk. Please try to remember this move a3 in the opening. We move now to the Budapest Spring Open. It's 2019, April, and pick up on a game between Peter Lisak, 2-4-7-2, and Louis Thibault, 2-2-5-1. And it's a great game with a blistering attack from white in our favourite line after knight b5. Well, black went knight a6, and now a3, as recommended. Black drove the knight back, and now just played very, very solidly as though nothing was happening here. Just bishop e7 and castles. Well, this idea of premature castling against the Jobava+London system is a significant one. And white's got to be alert to the type of position where he can attack. This is one of them, and Lisak went straight onto the attack with h4. Well, black reacted in the centre, correctly I think. White developed his knight and plunged the knight in on e5. As in so many of these queen's pawn games, you often find a knight on e5 gives you all the preconditions you need to start an attack. And that's exactly what happened in this game, as white moved forward again with g4. I mean, this is probably the reason we want to play the Jobava+London system, to land an attack like this. Please note that knight on a6. Very poorly placed. Takes so long to get back into the game. Well, black is worse. Knight e8 was answered by g5, and knight d6 by bishop h3. The white attack runs on oiled wheels. Again, black tried to create some counterplay in the centre by opening the c file, then putting his knight in on c4. Fair enough. White took it. Black recaptured. And now white repositioned his bishop on d3. Queen b6 came, and white played rook b1. Then came knight c7. This is a recognition that that piece is very poor and has to be redeployed. Bishop e5. Setting up an idea which black either overlooks or feels he can't do anything about. It looks like queen h5 is on the cards, but after bishop d6, which black may have felt was a good move, now white moves in with the classic double bishop sacrifice. Bishop takes, pawn check, king takes, queen h5 check, king g8, and now bishop takes g7. Yeah, it's just clearly a totally devastating idea in this position. Black played f5 in the game. If he takes a second bishop, then we just check, king g8, and we note that all the black pieces are on the queen side there, so that enables us just to play g6. Slightly surprising to me this wins, but it wins very handily. What is black to do here? Got to take it, check, king in the corner, and now the simplest move is rook g1. No hanging around. How's black going to stop mate here? Answer, he is not. So we go back to the game itself. Obviously black is dead here. He played f5. Bishop f6. Threatening queen to g6 checkmate. Or if black puts a piece on e8, queen h8 and queen g7. Black takes it, but of course that opens the g file, which white occupies. Knight e8, and now the not so surprising moves. Queen h6 check, king f7, queen g6 check. Black resigned. His mate in one move. So there we are, that was a splendid game, and it all came from initially quiet manoeuvres on the queen side. But white soon switched gears and went into the crazy mode, g4, h4, going straight for the black king. I mentioned the line earlier where black answers knight b5 with bishop d6 and said that the simple capture on d6 should give white some sort of small edge at the very least, going out of the opening. Looking through the databases, it's a bit of a surprise to see how many black players are going in for this, but nobody really strong. They seem to avoid this position with black, simply because they understand that giving white the bishop pair so early and having a slightly damaged structure, you know, is going to result in the type of game which black can never win, and white is bossing. But of course, words are cheap, and we need to see how it's done. So let's have a look at a game from the Bundesliga in Germany in 2016, which kind of illustrates how white should play the position, between Thorbjorn Broman, whose grade is 2405, probably an IM, I don't know that, but he probably is, and he's playing Kai Renaker, whose grade is 2246. So when you've got the two bishops, the idea generally is you slowly open the game. In the opening, you don't take too many risks, don't open it up for the knights, just slow it down, and gradually the bishops will show their strength as the game progresses. So it's exactly how white plays in this game. He just treats it like a normal London system now, but one where he has obtained the bishop pair. So black leads up to play e5. I mean, you couldn't say that black is not playing logically. Now white uses the dark squared bishop to probe the black king side, and in fact that pin is quite awkward. Ties the black queen down. Well, white's just going to continue with easy moves, bishop e2, maybe castles, things like that, awaiting events. Black loses patience, probably because he feels that white is moving around this bishop so many times that he's bound to have something in this position, but in fact what black is doing is weakening his position. The pawn triangle in the centre, c3, d4, e3, just holds everything together, and black cannot equalise in a position like this, no matter how hard he tries, and he is trying very hard. You know, Reinacker has centralised all his pieces, he's developed all his pieces, but there's no doubt about it, he has weaknesses to nurse. And after queen b3, white's already putting the finger on the weaknesses. The pawn at b7, the pawn at d5 is a bit tender. And after rook e7, rook fd1. So white's build up in this game, supremely logical. King g7 was answered by bishop b5, and that gives the nasty threat of queen takes d5 to black, and asks how black is going to react. Black tries a tactic, doesn't work. White outcalculates black in this tactical continuation. You see, the queen is now being decoyed away from the bishop on b5, but the problem for black is that when he takes the bishop, white can go d5. Maybe black thought he was getting away with f5 here, but the combination still hasn't finished now, as queen b1 was played, forcing the exchange of queens. Black played e4. Well, he's losing a piece if not. And now white chose a very simple way. Could have moved the knight. Knight e1 seems to win a piece in comfort, but this is clearer. And black resigned. The idea is, I guess, that when he takes the knight, white just goes bishop takes d6. And when the rook moves, well, we can just queen this pawn. So, very, very simple play by white, and kind of a demonstration that black's position after bishop d6, knight takes d6, is actually pretty prospectless. Well, our march through the black alternatives is about to end. You'll be pleased to know. This is the last variation, but it's a very important one, and this is the line where black plays c5, the immediate c5. Clearly this is a critical test of the white system. Black makes no concessions. He doesn't make a defensive move, he attacks the white centre, and he notes that knight b5 now is a silly move because of queen a5 check, and the knight has to go back where he came from. clearly that is a complete waste of time. So I think I'm going to recommend that white plays e3 here. And the first line we're going to look at is the line where black takes on d4, white recaptures with the pawn, and now black plays a key move, a6. He does that because he doesn't like the idea that knight c6 can be answered by knight b5. And that is important. So let's just drop back. a6. This has become the main line of c5. Well, I've got a game for you from an online blitz event played at Lichess in June 2020 between Brando Pavesi and Vladislav Sidorica. The black player is some 200 points higher rated than his opponent, so it is interesting to see what happens in this game. As white quickly whips up an attack, very typical of this opening variation. The first stage is to put the knight in on e5. Black continues to play very solidly, and now g4. No time is wasted to launch the typical bayonet attack, whereupon Sidorica dropped the bishop back. Now once again, this is a quick play game, so you have to forgive some of these decisions that are being made. Knight takes e5 has been played a lot. After that, I think white should take the bishop certainly, and when the knight drops back, the queen comes up to d3. Pawn on f5 has got a cramping effect. White's got two bishops. If black hassles the queen, we just drop back, and if he attacks our pawn, we can drive his knight back and defend again. And if g6, bishop h3, this would be typical play for this line, and white has a slight advantage, I would say. Dropping back, you're not going to get perfect play from every player. Bishop g6 just encourages white to play what he wants to play anyway. The nakedly aggressive h4. Well, already we've reached one of those obscure positions which are so typical of this system. If black is facing this for the first time, he might not get it right, even if he knows what he's doing. This is quite difficult to play. Black tried the very plausible move, queen b6. Looks attractive because it attacks b2 and d4, but white found a good way. He took on c6. Black recaptured with the queen. Now the knight came to a4. Black can't afford to waste any sort of time at all here, because white's threatening to win a piece with h5. So whatever black does, he's got to force the pace, which he did. That forces c3 to save the knight. And now black saved his bishop. So you couldn't say that black wasn't playing logically here, but still, white maintaining an advantage with moves like b4. Queen went back to d8, now bishop d3. Again, this is forcing play. Black can hardly leave the bishops on the board. And now g6. So although these players are not fantastically highly rated, they are producing logical chess. You couldn't say that what black is doing isn't logical. So knight c5 was played, e6, and now white castled on the king side. Quite difficult for black to break out of this position. White's idea is essentially to put a rook on e1 and then maybe to sacrifice on e6 with the knight. Black doesn't like that at all, so he chops the knight off and castles, whereupon white occupies the open file with rook b1. What is noticeable, of course, is that London's system bishop is stopping black from contesting the b file, so this is another trump in white's hand. Rook e8, trying to get the move e5 in. White stops it, or thinks he does. Black goes through with it anyway. A dubious decision, probably brought on by loss of time, but of course if black doesn't do that, then white has a significant grip on the position, which he can enhance with moves such as bishop d6 and f4. So black doesn't want to struggle against that, but this move I think is simply no good. White takes the pawn on offer. Black comes out to regain the pawn, but now e6. Possibly this was the move black overlooked. But in the long run, if he left the bishop on the board, it would have been difficult to stop white from gaining a big advantage anyway, because white could maybe double rooks on the g file after playing bishop d6 and f4, or on the b file after bishop d6 and f4, and black has no corresponding plan. This, I'm afraid, is bad. Black's king is opened up. The open file really did matter, and now queen f3 check is curtains. Black resigned. So that was our first little look at one of the main lines of the c5 variation. What has been extraordinary for me whilst researching and performing this DVD is the extent to which white has been able to work up devastating attacks using what outwardly looks like a very quiet system. And the next game is no exception. It's actually a game from 2013, an old game by this DVD standards, but it's from a Grandmaster tournament played in Sweden, I believe. It might be Denmark, but I think it's Sweden. And white is Johnny Hector, who is a very aggressive player, playing with the white pieces, and Mads Andersen 2477 from Denmark is playing black. And it's the same line as before, where white plays knight c3 and bishop f4, black plays the immediate c5, takes on d4 and goes a6. And we go into the main line with white plunging the knight in, black brings his bishop out, runs straight into the bayonet attack. Knight takes e5, g takes f5, knight c6. This time we're going to see this line in a proper game rather than analysis. I looked at knight b4 last time, that seemed to give white an edge. In this game, black plays g6. Well, the pawn on f5 is annoying for black, very annoying. It cramps his style. So is g6 an attempt to get rid of it? Well, I think it's more a recognition that, you know, black is going to struggle to develop his kingside pieces here unless he plays g6. But of course, by playing g6, he's given white something to latch onto. And so Hector is very alert to this, and he moves forward with the typical h4. And although it's difficult to get h5 in straight away, that is certainly his aim. Andersen, strong player, 2477, makes some overtures on the queen side, as he should probably do here, and he forces Hector backwards. But that is an attacking move, despite the fact that white is retreating. Black's got to move his queen. For instance, b4 here is simply no good. So black went queen b6, white played bishop g2, black's rook protected the central pawn, and only now did white strike with h5, and this is a very good move. It kind of decoys the black knight away from the centre. I mean, pawn takes pawn, either of the white pawns is ghastly for black. Black took on h5 and white took on d5 with the knight. So this is all working out very well for Hector. And the bishop pair are starting to come into their own. Black took on d4. Looks dubious. And in fact causes black some problems. There are some issues on the d file with knight c7 check, followed by mate on the back rank. So black's got to protect his knight. But now we get a nice continuation by Hector, who plays knight check, and then knight takes a6. That's not just a pawn, as the knight is going to come back into the game very quickly on either the c5 or the b4 squares. Black now realises that he's struggling. The knight comes back, working very well with the bishop on g2. Going to c8. Hector employed a forcing continuation, and the king came to f6, and now rook takes d4. So seemingly out of nowhere, white has fashioned what looks like a winning attack. King on f6 looks horribly placed, and black simply has no play. That is the problem with his position. He can't really do anything. He tried by moving the rook into the centre. Bishop f3. Not only does that cut out black's idea of coming to the 7th rank, it also threatens the knight on h5, which rather horribly, black defended with his king. Rook d7, very good. White's pieces are very well coordinated. Black's king is very active in this game, but unfortunately we all know what's going to happen here. Bishop takes h5. Black took on c6. The opposite colour bishops are going to facilitate either the winning of a pawn or a crushing attack. And so it happens in the game. White manages to trade down into a completely won double rook ending. Anderson resigned. So in this main line, what you have to remember is when the bishop comes out to f5, you hit it with g4. And don't be afraid about knight takes e5. You get the bishop pair and the chance to play a nice easy game after queen d3. To finish off then, another one of those inspiring attacks, so typical of this system. We moved to the Limburg Open, played in Maastricht in 2017, and playing white is Grandmaster Christian Bauer. Playing black, Fred Berendt, whose grade is 2, 3, 4, 6. The opening move order is not, strictly speaking, a Jobava+London system yet, but after knight c3, the game has transposed into our main line. And black decided to play e6 here. Well, this allows knight b5, an opportunity which Bauer took, and black has to defend himself with knight a6. Now it's a question of how white plays this position. Well, Bauer decided to go very quiet in the opening for the time being. Black attacked the knight on b5. White defended the knight, and black played bishop e7 and then castles. No sign whatsoever at the moment that there's going to be any sort of an attack. Just a quiet London system where you have to prefer white because of that lousy knight on a6. That really is gumming up the works for black. Knight e5. Well, if black had any sense of danger, once a white knight comes into e5, that sense should be alerted, because this means that white is getting ready for some sort of an attack which might involve the sudden advance of his kingside pawns. We've seen it so often in this variation. So black tries to intercept this by putting his knight in on e4. He's planning to get rid of that knight by playing f6. Some move like this. White played bishop d3, just encouraging black to play f6. And now I wonder whether Berendt saw Bauer's next move. Knight c4. Bit of congestion on the black queen side, which white is exploiting. Obviously, if black takes the knight, then white will take the knight and keep the edge. Black's pawn on c4 is quite weak, and white has no weaknesses whatsoever. So this is why in the game black retreated his queen. Well, Bauer forced the pace now suddenly. Small change of gear. He took the knight, black recaptured, and now put his own knight in on d6. Black took on d4, white recaptured, and now black plays a move which is bewildering at first sight, but I guess if you understand that he's fed up with his position already, then you might see why he played it. He played g5. Dropping back. Okay, is there anything better? Well, it's quite difficult for black to unravel his position. White threatening the pawn on e4. I suppose black could defend it, but then you have to prefer white in this position. It's just crawling all over black. How do we start? I mean, there are many moves. We could start with queen b3, we could start with bishop e5, we could start with g4. Black, meanwhile, is really struggling to find good moves. Maybe queen b3 is best of all. I mean, that seems to be a move with no risk to me, putting the pressure on. Black didn't like that. He struck out. Bishop came back. He struck out again. But this is extraordinarily risky play, because you're opening up your king. Please bear in mind, this black player is of FIDE master standard, very experienced. So to see him do this gives us the understanding that our opponents might do this too. Well, finally that knight came back into play, but it's a bit too late. The white queen now makes a very strong entry into the position, and after knight d5, queen h6, black had to suddenly defend himself against checkmate. No surprises for the next move. The can opener begins. h4, black's got to block, and now queen g5 check. That's a nice move. I wonder whether Berent was expecting it. In the middle of what looks like a crushing attack, white exchanges queens. But in fact this is a very profound move, because Bauer understands that his attack is not finished yet. There are all sorts of attacking ideas, and black struggles to defend himself. The first idea, of course, is to play g6, and if black takes, rook h8 is mate. So that explains knight e7, but white can actually build up here by doubling on the h file, and he does so in double quick time. Very nice. Knight came back to defend, but there was no defence to be had. White powers through with g6. Rook d7 was played, and now another very nice move. In many ways this is one of the nicest games on the DVD, because white is operating a winning attack, a crushing attack, without queens. Knight e8 is just very nice indeed. Black took, knight came in, king f7, and now white didn't even take the rook. Instead he prefers to play rook h7 check, and black resigned. Well, that concludes this DVD. I hope you've managed to obtain a lot of interesting ideas from it. The Jobava+London system is well worth playing, and I hope I've given you some good recommendations with which to start your adventure. Thank you for viewing, and I hope you've enjoyed this DVD as much as I've enjoyed making it for you. I'll certainly be giving the Jobava+London system a try in my games in the future.